Chapter 174. The people Zhou Haixing brought were sprawled all over the ground. Even he himself was thrown to the ground by Qin Shi. It took him a long time to regain his senses. From the time he got into the car to when Qin Shi pulled him down, the time it took was less than 30 seconds. In less than 30 seconds, Zhou Haixing already experienced the feeling of being on a roller coaster. Could this be fate? Was it destined that everything would go wrong in Shangjing? His wife was bullied when she casually entered a tea house, and when he brought people back to get back at them, he found out that the other party was a martial arts expert that he could not afford to provoke. Zhou Haixing really had 800 lifetimes worth of bad luck. For ordinary people, the martial Dao was not an unattainable existence. After all, everything in this world depended on talent. Music, painting, singing, dancing, and all kinds of sports. Even playing games required talent. Some people could play for 3 months and reach the diamond rank, while others could only hover around the gold rank after playing for a few years. Zhou Haixing once wanted to practice martial arts, but he was not cut out for it, so he stopped after a year or two. It was because he had learned martial arts that he knew how powerful martial arts experts were. This was not Jizhou, this was Shangjing. No matter how powerful he was in Jizhou, he had to lower his head in Shangjing. Zhou Haixing lay on the ground, not daring to move, but his mind was quickly thinking about how to solve this problem. Qin Shi did not know about Zhou Haixing's psychological changes, he just wanted to have a good chat with this pair of naughty parents. But at this time, Qin Shi suddenly felt something strange. On the street outside the tea house, a man and a woman suddenly walked over. The two of them were about 30 years old and were dressed very casually. They looked like a couple who came to Hohai to play. The man was holding a phone and constantly taking pictures. Martial artists did not know how to be invisible like Qin Shi, so they could only use their breathing, movements, and muscle expressions to disguise themselves as ordinary people. But because of years of training, martial artists' footsteps were usually very light. Moreover, martial arts required martial artists to have precise control of their body, so every step they took, whether it was posture or distance, was almost the same as the previous step. This was muscle memory that could only be formed after a long period of training. It was precisely because of this that even though they had disguised themselves perfectly, they still couldn't escape Qin Shi's eyes. Another detail was that this man and woman were not a couple at all. Although they looked very intimate, when the two of them looked at each other, their eyes couldn't help but avoid each other's gaze. It was obvious that they were a fake couple who got together at the last minute. Qin Shi ignored Zhou Haixing. Instead, he stood at the entrance of the tea house and looked at the couple through the gap between the two GL8s. He just stared at the two of them. She watched them stroll from outside the bar to outside the tea house. Although the two of them tried their best to pretend as if nothing had happened and chatted casually, being stared at by Qin Shi like this made them feel a strong pressure. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. And because of their nervousness, their movements were slightly stiff. The woman didn't even dare to turn her head to look at the tea house. But this kind of behavior was simply giving herself away. There were so many people lying in front of the tea house. If they were ordinary people, how could they not turn around to take a look? The two of them slowly walked in front of the tea house. But at this moment, Qin Shi suddenly waved at the two of them and shouted, "You two, come here for a second." The woman was so scared that she almost jumped up on the spot. Seeing this, the man next to her put his arm around her and pulled her forward. Seeing that they were still acting, Qin Shi suddenly lost interest, so he said coldly, "I'll count to 3, 1, 2. Before the third count, the man seemed to have made a decision. He suddenly pulled the woman in front of Qin Shi. They pretended not to see the wounded people on the ground. After they came in front of Qin Shi, the two of them bowed and said, "Mr. Qin." Seeing that the two of them were no longer acting, Qin Shi couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. He asked, "Did the Wu Lian send you?" "Yes, Mr. Qin, we belong to the Wu Lian inspection office. This is my ID." The man didn't dare to look up. As he spoke, he took out an ID from his pocket and respectfully handed it to Qin Shi. Qin Shi thought for a moment, then asked thoughtfully, "How many days have you been here?" 3 days. Hearing this answer, Qin Shi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. After his divine sense was damaged, he could only rely on his 5 senses to detect the movements around him. If it weren't for the fact that the tea house was smashed today, he probably wouldn't have been able to find the two of them. Being watched was always a bad experience, so Qin Shi thought for a moment, then frowned and asked, "Why are you watching me?" The man was silent. Seeing this, the woman couldn't help but nervously tug at the corner of his shirt. After the two of them quietly looked at each other, the man gritted his teeth and explained, "In Huaxia, all people above the master stage will be followed and observed by the inspector's office. Please forgive us for any inconvenience caused to you. Oh? Wu Lian has such a rule? What? Are you afraid that martial arts masters will cause trouble everywhere? Qin Shi asked casually. The man didn't answer Qin Shi's question, but lowered his head and repeated, "We're just following orders. Please forgive us for the inconvenience." The two of them obviously knew Qin Shi's strength. So even if Qin Shi didn't show any malice to them, they still felt a great deal of pressure. These two people were just small fries following orders, so Qin Shi didn't intend to make things difficult for them. After understanding the situation, Qin Shi said casually, "Okay, I got it. You can go." If he remembered correctly, his sister-in-law seemed to have a certain level in the Wu Lian. It seemed that he would have to call her later to ask. In fact, there was no need to ask at all. He could understand the Wu Lian's intention with just a little thought. Zongnanhai was not far to the south of Hohai. What if Qin Shi couldn't figure it out and went to Zongnanhai to have a go? If something really went wrong, no one would be able to bear the responsibility. Therefore, it was imperative to supervise the operation. To be honest, the Wu Lian didn't try to arrest Qin Shi, which was actually very polite. After hearing that they could leave, the two of them immediately breathed a sigh of relief. The woman turned to leave. But at this time, the man looked down at Zhou Haixing on the ground and asked, "Mr. Qin, do you need us to deal with it?" Zhou Haixing was not a young man who hadn't seen the world. When he heard the two words Wu Lian just now, he knew who he had provoked today. After listening to their conversation, Zhou Haixing was so scared that he lost all his strength. Wu Lian Inspection Office. Masters above the master level. Just a few words were enough to make Zhou Haixing realize the seriousness of the matter. Chapter 175. For the sake of peace and quiet, Qin Shi thought for a moment, and then let the two people from the inspector's office take away the unlucky Zhou Haixing. As for where they were taking Zhou Haixing, that was not Qin Shi's concern. He only hoped that this setback would give the naughty parents a different understanding of life, so that they could lead Tian, who had almost gone astray, back to the right track. The child was not wrong, it was their parents who were wrong. Nowadays everyone was equal. Their children were not made of gold, so how could they be more precious than other people's children? So what if they were rich and powerful? Other than Gao Li and Jin Pang Pang, who else in this world would dare to say that they were the number one rich second generation? Even Yin Yin was not as delicate as Tian. Thinking of this, Qin Shi could not help but feel a strong sense of pride from the bottom of his heart. Looking at other people's children and then looking at his own, it was true that there was no harm without comparison. When Qin Shi returned to the tea house, Gu Lao immediately asked with a smile, "Have you practiced martial arts?" The old man had already seen what happened through the glass, so he asked this question. "A little bit, but I'm still considered a beginner," Qin Shi replied with a smile, not intending to hide it. Hearing this, Gu Lao pointed at him and laughed as if he was joking. "You are so open-minded." "Don't, you're flattering me, I can't accept this evaluation." The two of them could be considered friends despite the difference in age, so they would often joke around casually. When Qin Shi sat back in the booth and finished the unfinished game, Gu Lao was ready to leave with the two brothers. Before leaving, Gu Lao took out another 20 yuan. But under Qin Shi's strong opposition, Gu Lao finally took back the 20 yuan. He and Qin Shi did not lack the 20 yuan. It was only a cup of tea, so it was a bit strange to do this every day. "Okay, let's make it clear in the future, you can't say that this old man is shameless, coming here to drink tea all day. How could that be? You're too polite." After exchanging a few pleasantries with Qin Shi, Gu Lao told the two brothers to leave. The three little fellows had already gotten used to this rhythm. Therefore, when the two brothers heard Gu Lao's call, the elder brother pouted and said to the little girl, "Sister, I'll come and play with you tomorrow." The younger brother quickly added, "Me too." "Me too." "All right." Looking at the two brothers who were about to leave, the little guy nodded heavily, his face full of reluctance. After changing their shoes, the two brothers ran to Gu Lao's side. Before they left, they didn't forget to turn back and wave at the little girl. "Goodbye, little sister." "Goodbye." The winter in Shangjing was already cold and it was still winter, so there were fewer and fewer guests. As soon as the two brothers left, the tea house immediately became deserted without the children's laughter. The little girl played alone in the children's playground for a while, but because she didn't have the company of the two brothers, she pouted and ran out after playing for a while. When Qin Shi saw her expression, he knew that she was a little depressed because there was no one to play with her. Therefore, Qin Shi picked up the little girl from the ground and threw her directly into the sky. His actions were too sudden, giving the little fellow a big fright. But when the little girl came back to her senses, she started to giggle. Is it fun? It's fun. It's fun. Okay, then let's do it 2 more times. Chin Roying sat behind the bar and watched them play for a while, then asked with a smile, "It looks like there won't be any business. Do you want to close and go home?" Before Chin-shi could answer, the little girl who was still flying in the air immediately turned her head and shouted, "Go home. Go home." Chin-shi caught the little girl, kissed her on the face and laughed. "Okay, let's go home." The tea house was closed. But before leaving, Chin-shi did not forget to set up a simple illusion array around. The trip to the Golden Triangle had completely exposed him. It was estimated that the Wulian people would peep at him with binoculars all day long. Although he didn't care, he didn't like to be peeped at. This incident also reminded Chin-shi that no matter where he went in the future, he had to hold his breath. Life finally returned to peace. Fame and fortune in life, but after death, they could only turn into a handful of yellow soil. Knowing how to live and learning to enjoy the happiness flowing in the plain life was the true meaning of life. What was happiness? Happiness was when cats eat fish, dogs eat meat, and Ultraman beat up small monsters. It seemed to be a simple and easy truth, but few people could really understand the essence of it. Another 2 days passed. Qin Shueching still didn't come back. No one knew what she was busy with during this time. On this day it was a rare sunny day. The bright sun made people unable to look directly at it. Under the reflection of the snow, the sun seemed to be a little brighter, illuminating the world and sweeping away the previous hazy darkness. The surface of Hohai Lake was sparkling. Standing under the sun, one couldn't help but feel a lot more relaxed. The weather was so good that Gu Lao brought the two brothers to the tea house early in the morning. However, he didn't come to play chess today. He had something to ask of Chen Shi. Gu Lao went on a long trip today and would only come back tomorrow. At this time in the past, Gu Lao would either bring the two brothers or send them to their mother. Now that he knew Chen Shi, he naturally didn't have to go through so much trouble. Because the two brothers had to stay with Chen Shi for a night, Gu Lao offered to give Chen Shi 200 yuan for living expenses, but Chen Shi decisively refused. It was okay to foster children, but giving money would be looking down on him. After several rejections, Gu Lao didn't insist anymore. He simply said a few words to the two brothers and then left in a hurry. Grandpa was going to leave them for a day, but there was no disappointment on the faces of the two brothers. Instead, there was excitement. In this regard, they were completely different from the little guy. Perhaps this was also an advantage brought by twins. The brothers' independence was obviously much stronger than the little guy. If Aunt Zhang wanted to foster the little guy to someone else for a night, the little guy's eyes would probably be swollen from crying. Today's weather was good. The three little guys stayed in the children's playground for a while. The older brother proposed to have a snowball fight outside. The little guy had already built a snowman, but he had never had a snowball fight. So when he heard that he wanted to have a snowball fight, he jumped up excitedly on the spot. In the winter, snowballs didn't hurt on the body, but it would be dangerous if they were hit on the head. Looking at the three little guys running out of the door, Qin-shi quickly asked Qin Roing to watch them, and he quickly ran to buy helmets, gloves and goggles for the three little guys. When the full set of equipment was ready, the three little guys started to have a snowball fight outside the tea house. A three-person melee was not fun, so under the organization of Qin-shi, they used snowballs to play sandbags. The older brother hid in the middle while the little guy and the younger brother stood on both sides of him and hit him with snowballs. Whoever hit him would be the one to dodge. Playing sandbags was not as fun as dodging sandbags. In order to be able to dodge sandbags in the middle, the three little guys were completely inspired. So when the older brother accidentally fell, he quickly got up on his own before Qin-shi could help him. The little guy took advantage of the fall to hit him, but the older brother shouted that it didn't count, causing the younger brother to constantly make a face at him, saying that he was shameless. The three little guys were noisy, and their laughter resounded throughout the street. The couple leaned against the railing and leaned against the lakeside of Hohai Lake, quietly watching them play. The warm winter sun, the breeze of Hohai Lake. The greatest happiness in the world, in fact, was nothing more than this. Chapter 176. Today's weather was really good, causing the tea house to have a few tables of guests for the first time. Even though the sun was out, the temperature should only be 3 or 4 degrees. The three little guys had been jumping around the whole morning, they were already tired and sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Strenuous exercise in the winter was easy to get sick, so Qin-shi took out 3 pills from Big Cat's snack tray and let each of them take one. Afterwards, Qin-shi also brought out 3 rattan chairs for them. When the three little guys were tired, they sat in a row outside the tea house, basking in the sun while discussing what to do next. The two brothers also had a restless personality. After resting for a while, they proposed to go outside for a stroll. The little guy was now the little follower behind the two brothers' buttocks. Wherever the two brothers wanted to go, the little guy wanted to go. Whatever the two brothers wanted to play, the little guy wanted to play. They really didn't have any opinions. There was no other way. Chinshi couldn't persuade them, so after discussing with Chin Roin, he took the three little guys out. There was a big difference between summer and winter in Hohai. In summer, the lakeside willows were swaying, the lush greenery was overflowing, boating on the lake was very leisurely and contented. In winter, the bare branches, white snow as far as the eye could see, there was only a piece of desolation. Only in the middle of January, when Hohai froze, would this place become lively again. Now there was still some time before Hohai froze, the skating rink was not open, and Chinshi didn't allow them to go near the lake, so after the three little guys circled around Hohai, they suddenly lost interest and kept clamoring to go back to play marbles. In the process of leading the three little guys back, Chinshi went to the nearby store to buy 3 yo-yos for them. He simply showed them a few moves, which immediately made the two brothers widen their eyes. Yo-yos were imported from overseas, so some of the names of the moves would become very Chinibyu after being translated. For example, the names of moves such as Force Whirlwind, Atomic Flame, Lightning Strike, and so on were simply too embarrassing. However, the two brothers seemed to think that it was very cool. After hearing Chinshi introduce this move as Force Whirlwind, the two of them became even crazier. They kept throwing the yo-yos in their hands, and at the same time they did not forget to shout, "Watch out! Force Whirlwind! Force Whirlwind! Bio bio bio! Watch my lightning strike! Take this!" The two brothers started fighting with their yo-yos. When the two ropes collided with each other, they immediately formed a dead knot, and it took them a lot of effort to finally untie it. Perhaps it was the difference between boys and girls. The little guy wasn't interested in the strange names of the moves. Instead, he was interested in how Chinshi retrieved the yo-yo. "Papa, teach me." The little guy handed the yo-yo to Chinshi and looked up at him expectantly. Chinshi took the yo-yo and picked it up with one hand. Then he walked towards the tea house and gave her a demonstration. "Come on, look, release it, take it back, be gentle. When the rope is tight, you lift it up. How is it? Have you learned it?" The little guy excitedly took the yo-yo from Chinshi's hands, and then did as he was told. He gently threw the yo-yo down, and when the rope tightened, he suddenly pulled it up, and the yo-yo was immediately wrapped in the rope and brought back. "I've learned it. I've learned it." The little guy excitedly put his arms around Chinshi's neck and giggled. Chinshi took the opportunity to kiss the little guy on the cheek, which made the little guy laugh even more. When Chinshi returned to the tea house with the three little guys, it was already past noon, so he ordered a few dishes in the restaurant next door and prepared to let the children eat. Chinshi moved the rattan chair back to the tea house and was ready to let the three little guys play inside, but the tea house welcomed another regular customer. Xiao Yuan. After not seeing her for a long time, Xiao Yuan finally dressed normally today. A down jacket and a pair of jeans, simple, seemed to be more suitable for her age. She was as pure as the spring moon, and as bright as a lotus flower. Xiao Yuan didn't come alone today. There was a middle-aged man about 50 years old standing next to her. The man was thin and tall, wearing a pair of glasses and a suit that didn't fit well. He always inadvertently gave people the feeling of an old pedant. He was obviously an intellectual. Chinshi was busy moving the rattan chair back to the tea house. After looking back at Xiao Yuan, he smiled and said hello to her. "Long time no see. Boss, let me help you." Xiao Yuan saw Chinshi's movements, so she quickly ran to his side and helped him move the last rattan chair. Chinshi didn't refuse. After Xiao Yuan helped him move the last rattan chair into the tea house, he walked out of the tea house with Xiao Yuan again, and then asked with a smile, "This is my father." Xiao Yuan replied a little embarrassedly, then stood to the side. At this time, Father Qiao went directly in front of Chinshi, and after bowing to him solemnly, he said excitedly, "Thank you, boss. Thank you for saving my life." Chinshi was a little embarrassed by his enthusiastic attitude, so he quickly smiled and said, "You don't have to be like this. You're too polite. It was just a small matter." No. It was just a small matter to you, but to me it was a life-saving grace. The ancients say that a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring, let alone a life-saving grace. After saying that, Father Qiao bowed to Chinshi again. Chinshi was really not used to dealing with old pedants like this. After helping Father Qiao up, he quickly said, "It's cold outside. Come in and sit." Seeing this, Qiao Yuan quickly mediated and said, "Dad, let's go in and talk." The father and daughter of the Qiao family came specially to thank Qin Shi. Huaxia's medical field divided chronic kidney failure into 4 stages: renal compensation stage, renal decompensation stage, renal failure stage, preuremia, and uremia stage. The medical field of the United States divided chronic kidney failure into 5 stages. The so-called uremia stage was the 5th stage of chronic kidney failure, and it was also the final stage. The important indicator of kidney failure was the creatinine value. 133 was the first stage, 186 was the second stage, 451 was the third stage, and more than 707 meant that one had entered the 4th stage, which was the uremia stage. The higher the creatinine, the more toxins in the body, and the greater the damage to the kidney. When the creatinine value exceeded 500, one could begin to consider dialysis. The purpose of dialysis was to reduce the creatinine value. Human organ failure itself was an irreversible phenomenon. If it could be reversed, the person could live a long life. Therefore, there was no other treatment for uremia except for dialysis and kidney transplant. After every dialysis, the creatinine value in the patient's body would decrease. However, it would not be long before the creatinine value continued to rise because the patient's kidney function had been necrotic. If the organ was necrotic, it would take a miracle to recover. However, what everyone did not expect was, a miracle really happened. Qin Shi casually gave a pill. After Father Qiao took it, his blood creatinine value began to decrease. Now it had dropped to 480 from the 4th stage to the 3rd stage. This kind of reversal was almost impossible. This meant that Father Qiao's kidney function had begun to recover and perform the function of detoxification again, causing the creatinine value to continue to decrease. According to this progress, it would not be long before he recovered. Father Qiao's case shocked the entire Huaxia's medical field. After the hospital confirmed that Father Qiao's condition had indeed improved, Father Qiao refused to cooperate with the hospital's investigation and secretly went straight to Beijing with Qiao Yuan. Chapter 177. Father Qiao had only entered the stage of kidney failure before, and his blood creatinine value had not exceeded 707 UML/L. His illness was discovered early and dialysis control was done in time, so he had not truly entered the final stage, which was often referred to as the late stage of uremia. However, organ failure itself was an irreversible process. Even if it was discovered early, modern medicine could only control the patient's condition as much as possible and delay the deterioration of the condition. Father Qiao was indeed very lucky. Before his kidney function had completely failed, he had taken Qin Shi's elixir in time, so he was able to effectively suppress the condition and let his organ function begin to recover. This time he had come to visit Qin Shi with a grateful attitude, so he had brought a lot of Guangzhou specialties such as Guanan bacon, black rice, fragrant rice and other local specialties. Although they were not worth much, they were worth the thought. As the saying went, goose feathers were sent from 1,000 miles away. The gift was light but the thought was heavy. Perhaps it was because Father Qiao had been diligent in teaching for a lifetime that he had saved enough good fortune for himself. Therefore, he had never thought that this kind of grateful attitude would actually save his life by accident. A simplified version of the energy elixir would not be able to fully restore his kidney. After the effect of the elixir wore off, his condition would naturally begin to deteriorate again. As the saying went, when you saved someone you should help them to the end. Qin Shi was not a stingy person. After hearing Father Qiao's intentions, he took out 2 more energy elixirs from the bar counter. It was still the same explanation. The pills left by the old Chinese medicine doctor were very helpful for kidney disease. But this time, when Qiao Yuan took the pills from Qin Shi's hand, she was so excited that her whole body trembled slightly. After Qin Shi told them that they could take it all at once, Qiao Yuan hurriedly helped her father swallow the 2 pills one by one. After taking the pills, the father and daughter were so excited that they could not control themselves. A teacher in a small county had not seen much of the world in his life. He did not even know how to say a few words of courtesy. He only knew how to repeatedly thank Qin Shi. Looking at his excited expression, it was as if he was about to dig out his heart and show it to Qin Shi. Qiao Yuan wasn't any better. When she heard that Qin Shi had convinced her father to take these 2 pills, she was so excited that tears almost flowed out. It was actually quite painful to deal with people who didn't know how to socialize. One of the most likely situations to occur was awkwardness. Everyone felt awkward because they couldn't get along. Therefore, Qin Shi thought for a while and changed the topic to Qiao Yuan. At the mention of his daughter, Father Chow finally opened his mouth. In that little corner of our little place, old Chow can be considered to have some fame. When Chow Chow came home and told me all those things, I almost fainted from anger. If it wasn't for her mother stopping me, I would have beaten her to death. I came to Shangjing this time to thank you in person. Thank you for saving my life. Secondly, I want Jojo to return all the money I swindled. Although we are poor, we don't earn this kind of black-hearted money. After all, Xiao Yuan was only a university student in her early 20s and hadn't experienced society. To put it bluntly, she was still insensible and hadn't grown up. She only wanted to earn money to treat her father's illness, but she didn't think about how to earn money. She did whatever came quickly. If everyone was like her, then society would be a mess. The Qiao family didn't have much money, but Qiao Yuan grew up in a scholarly family and received a good education. However, because of a small setback in front of her, she went astray and did the shady business of swindling people. This kind of behavior was simply unforgivable in Father Qiao's eyes. Although in a big city like Shangjing, Qiao Yuan's family could only be considered as ordinary people living at the bottom of society. However, it was this kind of country teacher who had never seen the world and couldn't even speak standard Mandarin that always had the awareness of being a role model. Therefore, he couldn't accept his daughter's behavior at all. Father Qiao punished Qiao Yuan by kneeling for an entire night and then asked Qiao Yuan to return all the money to others. Together with the keyboard player and the boss's share, she had to return the amount that they were swindled of. The last deal was with Wang Hao's brother. The money had already been returned, but before that, Qiao Yuan had already earned 12,000 yuan. In other words, she had to pay back an additional 18,000 yuan when she returned it. Back then she only earned 12,000 yuan, but now she had to return 30,000 yuan. Of course, Qiao Yuan didn't have that much money, so the remaining 18,000 yuan was naturally paid by Father Qiao. When it came to matters of principle, Father Qiao was very old-fashioned and wouldn't change what he had decided on. Qiao Yuan couldn't persuade him, so she could only call people in front of Father Qiao. After returning the money, Qiao Yuan also received countless curses and scoldings. She felt so wrong that she cried a few times. However, from Father Qiao's point of view, she only had herself to blame and didn't deserve sympathy. After hearing how Father Qiao educated his daughter, she couldn't help but look back at the three little guys in the corner. As a father, Father Qiao was clearly qualified. When the children went down the wrong path as a parent, he naturally had to pull them back. A teacher in a small county who had taught for a lifetime might seem mediocre to others, but at least when it came to educating children, Father Qiao was absolutely successful. The two didn't chat for long before the restaurant next door delivered the food that Qin had just ordered. Qin warmly invited the father and daughter of the Qiao family to stay for a meal, but Father Qiao was unwilling. After repeatedly thanking Qin for saving his life, he hurriedly left with his daughter. He came by train and didn't know how long it would take to arrive, so he didn't buy a return ticket. He should still be able to make it if he rushed to buy a ticket now. From Guangzhou to Shangjing, it would only take 5 or 6 hours. This way he could still save on today's accommodation fee. The father and daughter of the Qiao family came in a hurry and left in a hurry. However, Father Qiao's appearance brought a lot of inspiration to Qin. From this, it could be seen that educating children was a long and arduous task. As a parent, it wasn't enough to just raise a child. The tea house continued to operate. The winter sun was very short. Before 4 o'clock, it was gloomy outside again. The three little guys were tired from playing today, so they seemed a little listless all afternoon. Drowsiness was contagious. After the little guy fell asleep on the climbing mat, the two brothers also lay down next to her and fell asleep. It wasn't until they were about to close that Qin Ruoying woke them up. The two brothers first rubbed their eyes. When they heard Qin Ruoying say that she was going to take them home, they nodded in a daze. Grandpa said that they had to listen to their uncle and aunt today. But it wasn't until Qin picked up the little guy and Qin Ruoying led them out of the tea house that the two brothers finally came back to their senses. Chapter 178. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the family of 3 brought their 2 followers back to the Sihiyuan. Most of the local residents in Hohai lived in the Sihiyuan. Therefore, the 2 brothers didn't feel that there was anything special about their 2-section Sihiyuan. This place only had an extra front yard and a few more rooms compared to a normal Sihiyuan. But because this was their sister's home, the 2 brothers were curious about every room. Once they entered the courtyard, the little boy led them everywhere. The back room, the west room, the east room, the main hall, and the back room. They ran through every single room. They even alerted Qin Yongyan in the study. When the little boy saw his grandfather, who had not shown up for a long time, he immediately stood under the eaves and sweetly shouted, "Grandfather!" When the two brothers heard this, they very obediently followed the little boy and shouted, "Hello, grandfather!" Qin Yongyan lowered his head and looked at the three little ones in front of him. Then he couldn't help but laugh. Using his hand to pat their heads, Qin Yongyan smiled and said, "Good boys, you guys go play." Okay. The little boy nodded and led the two brothers into the main hall. She was still a little unfamiliar with her grandfather. If it was Aunt Zhang, the little boy would have already run over to her and asked for a hug. Looking at the three little guys running away in front of him, the smile on Qin Yongyan's face didn't disappear for a moment. He looked to be in his 40s, but in reality Qin Yongyan's real age was even older than Aunt Zhang. At 30, no doubts at 40, knowing destiny at 50, ear docile at 60 and senile at 70. The so-called ear docile didn't mean that one's ears were sharp, but it meant that one could listen to unpleasant words. It didn't matter if one was cursed or scolded. Nothing could go against one's heart. At this age, one had basically seen through life and seen through fame and fortune. Perhaps it was because of his state of mind, Qin Yongyan's recent cultivation progress could be said to be very fast. He was almost at the late stage of qi refinement. As his cultivation progressed, Qin Yongyan became more aware of Qin Shi's power. His son-in-law was so powerful that his father-in-law couldn't even raise his head in front of him. But it was also because of this that his daughter was living a happy life now. Qin Ruoying didn't even dare to imagine such a life. Even he felt like he was living in a dream. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan could not help but shake his head and return to the study. After the three little fellows walked around the entire courtyard, they finally returned to the front of the main hall. Because they wanted to have a good game of hide and seek. Rock, scissors, paper. Rock, scissors, paper. After 3 draws, the little fellow and her brother used scissors, while her brother used paper. After realizing that he had lost, the elder brother stomped his feet in anger. However, he was willing to accept his loss. Although he was a little unwilling, he still obediently leaned on the table and counted loudly. The little fellow and her brother turned around and ran out of the main hall. The younger brother was still a little unfamiliar with the road, so he followed the little fellow with his head down and ran towards the west wing. Seeing this, the little fellow could not help but become anxious. She did not dare to speak, so she could only push her brother to the opposite east wing. After her brother turned around and ran to the east wing in a panic, the little fellow slipped into the wardrobe in the west wing. This was her favorite place to hide because there were a lot of clothes in the wardrobe, so it was very warm to squeeze in there. The elder brother's countdown soon ended. When he walked out of the main hall, the entire courtyard quieted down. Qin Shi was busy cooking for them in the kitchen, while Qin Ruoying stood on the steps outside the west wing and looked at him with a smile. The elder brother was very clever. After looking around, he trotted to Qin Ruoying, raised his head and whispered, "Auntie, do they know where they are hiding?" Hearing this, Qin Ruoying shook her head with a smile and did not tell him. The elder brother had no choice but to look for them honestly. He first went into the west wing and looked around but did not find anything strange. It was probably because this was not his home, so the elder brother did not think of looking through the wardrobe. After looking around and not seeing anyone, the elder brother ran directly to the east wing opposite. At this time, the little fellow who had been paying attention to the situation outside, quietly pushed open the wardrobe a little. After confirming that the elder brother had left, the little fellow came out of the wardrobe, and then leaned against the window to secretly observe the elder brother's every move. Not long after the elder brother ran into the east wing, there was a burst of cheers from inside. Then the elder brother walked out with the younger brother, who was frowning. Perhaps wanting to end this game quickly, after the elder brother looked around the main hall, the younger brother pointed to the west wing quietly. Seeing this, the elder brother immediately rushed into the west wing with a laugh. The little fellow was leaning against the window, laughing secretly. When she saw the elder brother rushing to the west wing, she was suddenly shocked. She wanted to crawl back into the wardrobe, but it was too late, so she was caught red-handed by the elder brother, who rushed over. "Found you. I found you." The elder brother's proud laughter sounded in the courtyard. Hide-and-seek was indeed a very fun game. As long as the venue was suitable, it could be played for a long time. The 3 little guys played several games in a row until Qin Shi finished cooking dinner. They reluctantly returned to the west wing under the husband and wife's greeting. After dinner, the sky was already dark. Qin Ruoying did not allow them to go out and run around, so the 3 little guys sat on the bed and watched cartoons. The elder brother wanted to watch Pigman, the younger brother wanted to watch Boonie Bears, and the little fellow wanted to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. The three little guys had different opinions and immediately quarreled over the control of the remote control. Seeing this, Chin-shi had to suppress them. He took the remote control and let them order Frozen. The little fellow had already seen it once, but she still enjoyed watching it the second time. It was the brothers' first time watching it, so they were immediately fascinated by the beautiful magic world inside. There was a kissing scene in Frozen. When the elder brother saw Anna and Christopher hugging and kissing, the elder brother followed suit and turned his head to kiss the little fellow. But just as his mouth was about to kiss the little fellow, the elder brother regrettably found that there seemed to be an air wall between him and Yin Yin. No matter how hard he tried, there was no way he could get closer. The elder brother's movements were very fast. After being stopped by Chin-shi, Chin Roying noticed that something was wrong. When she saw the elder brother's embarrassed look as he tried to kiss the little fellow, she could not help but secretly laugh. At this time, the little fellow also noticed that something was wrong with her brother. Just as she turned her head, she was shocked by her brother's pig-like appearance, so she patted his forehead with her hand and muttered, "What are you doing?" The elder brother awkwardly retracted his head and then hid under the blanket, not daring to show his head. The husband and wife looked at each other and could not help but shake their heads and laugh. 4 or 5-year-old children did not have so many dirty thoughts. Their behavior was learned from the things around them, so Chin-shi did not blame him. However, it was because of the elder brother's sudden action that they completely lost the opportunity to sleep with the little fellow. After watching the cartoon, the two brothers were carried by Chin-shi, one in each hand, and directly led them to the east wing. Tonight, the little fellow slept with Chin Roying, and the two brothers slept with him. The two brothers cried and made a fuss, shouting that they wanted to sleep with their sister. But Chin-shi did not pay attention to them at all, as if he did not hear them. They wanted to take advantage of his daughter. Chapter 179. The two brothers hesitated for a long time. Although they were usually very outgoing, they seemed to be homesick at night. The one they were most familiar with in the courtyard was the little guy, so the two brothers always wanted to sleep with the little guy. But no matter how much they cried, Chin-shi was unmoved. He was quite traditional in this aspect. Because Nyin-Yin was a girl, Chin-shi always felt that his daughter would be at a disadvantage if she stayed with a boy. Plus, his brother almost took advantage of the little guy just now, which made Chin-shi even more certain that girls were at a disadvantage. He was already very polite that he didn't chase the two brothers out of the courtyard. Although the two brothers were still young, 3 to 6 years old was the sensitive period for a child to construct a psychological gender. As a parent, it was natural to teach the child that there was a difference between men and women. Parents gave the child the correct guidance, and as the child grew up, they would gradually form a comprehensive understanding of men and women's clothing, behavior, and personality traits, and gradually form their own psychological gender. As for those parents who raised the boy as a girl and the girl as a boy, in fact, he really should go see Farewell My Concubine, because Ching Ge was an excellent example. This was called transsexualism in the medical field, which was also called gender identity disorder. There were both congenital and acquired factors. If it was congenital, then it was fine, but if it was acquired by the parents, then it could be called a tragedy. Chin-shi had already made up his mind. One day he would have to properly educate the three little guys and let them understand the difference between men and women. The east room was Qin Shueching's room. Although she hadn't been home for many days, there was still a faint fragrance in the room. The bed was very comfortable to sleep on, but the two brothers tossed and turned for a long time. Chin-shi was not Gulao after all, nor was he the brother's father. So after a while, seeing that Chin-shi still refused to agree, they could only obediently lie on the bed with pouted lips. The two brothers were also tired today, so it didn't take long for them to fall into a deep sleep. After they fell asleep, Chin-shi cast 2 meditation incantations on the two brothers, and then quietly walked out of the east room. It was the wee hours of the morning and there was no moon tonight. It was so dark in the courtyard that one couldn't even see their own fingers. The temperature in the middle of the night was very low. The bone-piercing cold wind kept blowing, bringing with it some light snow that drifted into the courtyard. There was a slight fluctuation of spiritual aura in the west wing and the main room. That was because Qin Roying and Qin Yongyan were both cultivating diligently. Qin Roying had to take care of the child during the day so she could squeeze out some time to cultivate at night. In addition, her cultivation was not high, and she had to sleep for at least 4 hours every day, so the progress of her cultivation was very slow. Compared to Qin Roying, Chin-shi's cultivation progress could be said to be advancing by leaps and bounds. He would leave every night and head to Spirit Mountain to cultivate. The terrain there was remote, and it could be considered the place with the densest spirit chi within a radius of 1,000 miles. In this place, Qin could fully refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Based on his current accumulation of quintessential essence, it was actually comparable to the early stage of Yuanying. Although there was still a long way to go before he reached the soul formation stage, at least Qin would not need to burn his essence blood when facing an expert at the level of a divine general. Quintessential essence was the foundation of all cultivators. No one would joke around with their lives, including Qin. If Qin previous situation was described in a game, then he was a mid-tier sorcerer who had no mana and could only rely on normal attacks. After this period of recovery, Qin could finally use some small skills. However, because he had not added any skill points, even if he had enough mana, Qin could not use any big skills. Quintessential essence could be slowly recovered, but the damage to the soul could not be healed by cultivation alone. There was a spiritual medicine in Heavenly Spiral that specialized in healing soul injuries, and that medicine was one of the main methods to heal soul injuries. Unfortunately, this type of medicine was an extremely rare heavenly treasure to begin with. With the current situation of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, it was almost impossible to produce such a high-grade spiritual medicine, so Qin really could not think of any way to heal his soul injuries. When the soul was damaged, the divine sense was the most affected. His divine sense was like a radar, allowing Qin to sense everything within 1,000 miles without using his 5 senses. Not even the slightest movement in the wind could escape his eyes. Without the divine sense, Qin had to rely on his eyes to determine his direction while flying in the sky, which was really uncomfortable. Spirit Mountain's location was unique, and the giant rock at the top of the mountain had become Qin's exclusive throne. As usual, after carefully inspecting the surroundings, Qin sat cross-legged on the rock and began to cultivate. However, not long after he closed his eyes, he suddenly opened them again. It was a little strange. According to common sense, he had been cultivating here for a period of time, so the spiritual energy here should be a little thinner. After all, he was a cultivator in the soul formation stage, not a beginner like Qin Ruoying. Every time Qin cultivated with all his strength, he would naturally have an aura that could swallow mountains and rivers. A night's effort was enough to catch up with several months of Qin Ruoying's effort. Although Spirit Mountain was large, there were only a few places with dense spiritual energy. But why did the spiritual energy nearby not seem to have changed much after he cultivated here for a period of time? Could it be that he was cultivating a false immortal? But this was obviously impossible. After all, the true essence that Qin refined was real. He was still worried that if he cultivated with all his strength, he might devour all the spiritual energy nearby, causing Spirit Mountain to become a dead mountain without any vitality. But who would have thought that such a strange situation would occur now? Qin stood up from the boulder. In order to confirm the cause, he flew around Spirit Mountain. However, after flying around, he didn't find anything strange. Everything was very natural. It was completely a natural paradise. Could it be this endless stream of spiritual energy was flowing from somewhere else? It sounded a little ridiculous, but after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make some sense. After all, spiritual energy was like air flowing at any time. Maybe the spiritual energy here flowed from Taihang Mountain? Unable to find the reason and not finding any abnormalities, Qin simply threw this question to the back of his mind. Since the spiritual energy here was so rich, he wouldn't be polite. After setting up a spirit gathering array on the mountain peak, Qin began to cultivate with all his strength. This time he didn't restrain himself. He opened his stomach and swallowed like a tautai. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged. Because of the violent surge of spiritual energy, a cloud vortex even appeared in the sky above Spirit Mountain. Qin wanted to see if the spiritual energy here would decrease if he cultivated with all his strength. Time flew by. When the sun came out from the clouds in the east, Qin slowly opened his eyes. Under his hard work, the spiritual energy here had decreased by a large amount as he wished. Chapter 180. Perhaps because of the home field advantage, the two brothers completely became the little guy's followers. When they woke up, Qin had just finished helping them wash up, and the two brothers rushed into the west wing. The little guy was already sitting on the chair and eating breakfast. When he saw them rushing in, he held up a steamed bun and smiled at them. Time for breakfast. Children don't know what is polite, so they rushed over as soon as they entered the door. The older brother saw that there was only one chair in front of him, so he pushed his younger brother away and quickly sat on the chair himself. The younger brother was not happy, so he pushed him a few times and squeezed in to sit with him. You go over there. I don't want to. I want to sit here. Get out of the way. You're squeezing me? What? This is not your chair. Qin Ruoying looked at the two brothers and then got up to give the seat to the younger brother, which stopped their first quarrel of the day. This was the bad thing about twins, they always wanted to win or lose. Qin Ruoying was serving the three little guys, but Qin Shi suddenly received a call from Gu Lao. The old man was delayed by something, so he would not be back until the afternoon. Although he believed that Qin Shi would not treat the two brothers badly, out of concern for his grandson, Gu Lao talked with Qin Shi for a while, and then euphemistically expressed that he wanted to talk to the two brothers. Hearing this, Qin Shi turned on the speaker and put the phone in front of the two brothers. The two brothers, one after another, related in a little while what they had done on the previous day. After listening, Gu Lao finally felt relieved and hung up the phone. Qin Shi told the two brothers that their grandfather would come back in the afternoon to pick them up. However, what he did not expect was that the two brothers were not sad at all after hearing the news, but jumped with joy. Uncle, can you take us out to play? Huh? Where do you want to go? The amusement park. Hearing this, Qin Shi and Qin Ruoying couldn't help but look at each other. It was probably because they heard Nian Yin bragging about her experience at the children's playground that the two brothers engraved that place in their minds. Just like Nian Yin in the past, she was very envious of others, but Auntie Zhang couldn't bring her along. Thinking about it, it was quite pitiful. Thus, Qin Shi patted the brothers' heads and said with a smile, "Okay, Uncle will take you there. We'll leave after breakfast, okay?" "All right." The two brothers were so excited that their faces turned red, while the little fellow was smiling proudly at the side, as if silently saying that they were basking in her light. What was the reaction of the child when he was excited? He stomped his feet. After hastily eating breakfast, her brother ran to the steps outside the west wing. He kept jumping and shouting, "Hurry up, hurry up." It's almost afternoon. When the younger brother saw this, he also ran out and kept stomping his feet on the steps. No one knew what they were doing. The little fellow was really proud today and the smile on his little face never stopped. After a simple packing, Qin Shi carried the little fellow and Qin Ruoying held the two brothers, 2 adults and 3 children, and the group of 5 slowly walked out of the courtyard. It was still troublesome for the 5 of them to take a taxi. The 3 little fellows didn't want to be separated, and Qin Shi didn't want to be separated from Qin Ruoying, so it wasn't until the 3rd car that the driver finally agreed to give them a ride. He also asked one of the little fellows to hide and not be seen by the traffic police. The Children's Experience Museum last time was for civilian consumption, so this time Qin Shi was going to take them to a high-end one. Nkid Swithlanfaringus, a children's amusement park that didn't even have a Chinese name, was known as the cutest fairy tale world in Shangjing, and was also a holy place for internet celebrities to take photos. This place couldn't be entered without children, so many internet celebrities had to make a special trip to borrow a child. The tickets were very expensive because it was the weekend, and the package cost 568 yuan. It was limited to 1 adult and 1 child, and they could only play for 2 hours. This place was not as big as the Children's Experience Museum last time, but the decoration was extremely exquisite. After putting on anti-skid socks and walking in, they were greeted by a giant teddy bear about 3 meters tall. The 3 little fellows had never seen such a big teddy bear in their lives, so they were shocked on the spot. The teddy bear sat on the ground, and both of its legs were about 1 meter tall. The little fellow stood next to it and wanted to climb onto the big bear's legs, but she couldn't climb up. Seeing this, the older brother immediately came to her side. Then, like a little eunuch welcoming a princess on a horse, he bent his back and knelt on the ground, then said loudly, "Sister, you're stepping on my back. I'll carry you up." Hearing this, the little fellow didn't hesitate at all. She stepped on his back and climbed up. Seeing that she was struggling to climb, the younger brother stood below and pushed the little fellow's butt hard. Qin Shi stood aside and watched, speechless. Qin Ruoying saw his expression and knew that he felt that his daughter was at a disadvantage again, so she couldn't help but complain, "They're still children. Why do you have so many dirty thoughts?" Okay, I'm dirty. After being scolded by his wife, Qin Shi had to raise his hands and surrender with a wry smile. The couple didn't interfere with their actions. After the little fellow climbed up, the younger brother also wanted to step on the older brother's back and climb up. But at this time, the older brother quickly stood up from the ground and said to the younger brother, "You carry me up and I'll pull you up after I'm up." The younger brother didn't doubt him, so he stood below and supported the older brothers but with all his strength, sending him up. The little fellow sat on the big bear's leg and pulled the older brother's arm up with all her strength. With their joint efforts, the older brother successfully climbed up. However, after the older brother went up, he didn't pull the younger brother. After making a face at the younger brother, he laughed proudly and said, "Come up by yourself." With that, the older brother jumped onto the other leg of the big bear. The younger brother stood below and looked at the little fellow and the older brother on the big bear's leg with a confused expression. He tried to climb up by himself, but the big bear's leg was higher than him, so it was impossible for him to climb up. "I'll pull you up." The little fellow couldn't stand the older brother's behavior, so she immediately lay on the big bear's leg and reached out to the younger brother. However, her strength was limited, so she couldn't pull the younger brother up by herself. The younger brother slipped down again. Looking at the older brother's proud look, the more the younger brother thought about it, the more wronged he felt. He couldn't help but cry out of anger. Seeing this, Qin wanted to go forward and help his younger brother, but he was stopped by Qin Ruoying. "Wait, let's see." Sure enough, seeing the younger brother cry, the smile on the older brother's face froze. He thought for a moment and immediately jumped back, then lay on the big bear's leg and said to the younger brother, "Don't cry. I'll pull you up." With that, the older brother stretched out his hands to the younger brother. The little fellow also stretched out her hands again. The younger brother wiped his tears, glanced at the older brother, and then stretched out his hands very aggrievedly. Finally, with the joint efforts of the little fellow and the older brother, the younger brother successfully climbed onto the big bear's leg. Although the older brother finally pulled him up, the younger brother seemed to be still angry with the older brother, so after coming up, he directly jumped onto the other leg of the big bear to sulk. At this time, Qin Ruoying took out her mobile phone with a smile, then came to the big bear and took a group photo of the three little guys. In the photo. Chapter 181. Inkid Swithlani. The ticket price for Friends was so high, but seriously it was not worth the price. Especially for people like Qin who could only take a few photos all year round, this place was not as entertaining as the Children's Experience Center that he took the little guy to last time. There were only a few main amusement facilities here. Brown Bear's rock climbing wall, Coney Rabbit's spider tower, Edward's slide, Leo the Frog's trampoline, Steamed Bun Man's sky net, as well as a pink ocean pool and some scattered small toys. The biggest selling point was not the children's entertainment facilities at all, but the decoration design style. The background was white, giving people a clean and bright feeling, and there were giant dolls everywhere. Once people walked in, they would feel like they were in a fantasy world. Therefore, it became a selfie mecca for online celebrities to show off their love. The designer probably targeted the parents, not the children themselves. That was why it was so popular. Of course, this did not mean that this place was useless. After all, these entertainment facilities were still very attractive to children. The children's paradise was divided into two levels. The upper level was a hollow climbing net with a rotating slide in the middle. Perhaps because there were so many people, the voices of the three little guys were particularly loud, attracting a lot of attention as soon as they came in. The weekend ticket was 200 yuan more expensive than the weekday ticket, so there were fewer people. The three little guys walked into the children's paradise. As soon as they saw the climbing net leading to the second floor, the older brother immediately shouted, "I want the slide." His words were like a spark thrown into a barrel of explosives, instantly igniting the little guy and the younger brother. The three little fellows rushed towards the climbing net almost as if they were trying to outdo each other. They had to compete to see who could climb faster, and who fell behind was a puppy. The parents could only wait below, so the couple sat by the ocean pool and quietly watched the three little guys play. There were many people who came here to take photos, and there was even an internet celebrity lying in the ocean pool and doing a live broadcast. Perhaps affected by the surrounding atmosphere, Qin asked Qin Ruoying to take out her mobile phone. The two of them also planned to join in the fun and take a selfie. Just as the two of them leaned together to take selfies with their mobile phones, a little girl holding a DSLR carefully approached them. "Hello, I'm a student from Peking University's photography department. Can I take a picture for you?" The little girl's name was Sun Yuan. Her name was round, but she was actually a skinny little girl who was less than 1.6 meters tall. In terms of age, she was about the same age as Qiao Yuan, so she seemed a little shy. After saying this to Qin Ruoying, Sun Yuan held the SLR camera and stood in front of the couple with a nervous expression. Qin Ruoying glanced at her and did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned to look at Qin. After the couple communicated silently, Qin nodded with a smile and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." "Thank you." Hearing Qin's reply, Sun Yuan couldn't help but nod excitedly, then took a few steps back with the camera. She didn't know much about photography. He thought that professionals like them would have a lot to pay attention to, so he asked politely, "What do you want us to do? Do you want us to pose in any way?" "It's natural to shoot portraits. You can be more casual, just like when you took the selfie just now." Sun Yuanyuan knelt on the ground with one knee, holding the lens with one hand and the camera with the other. She was clearly in the zone, so her speech was much clearer and more fluent than before. "That's all?" Yes, that's all. You can be more casual and do whatever you want." The couple sat side by the ocean pool. Qin Ruoying thought for a while, then gently leaned her head on Qin Shi's shoulder, and Qin Shi naturally held her hand. They didn't look at the camera but stared at each other, and in less than a second they were in the zone. It was a common look between lovers. Seeing this, Sun Yuanyuan was excited on the spot. Click, click, click. After pressing the shutter several times, she stood up again with the camera. Sun Yuanyuan looked at the photos and her face was full of excitement. Judging from her expression, she seemed to be very satisfied with these photos. "Take a look. Are you satisfied?" The photo rights belonged to the couple, so she immediately took the camera and handed it to them. "It's okay, I like it." Qin Ruoying smiled and nodded. Hearing this, Sun Yuanyuan couldn't help but clench her fists in excitement. She said excitedly, "Can I add you on WeChat? I'll send the photos to you after I export them." Qin Ruoying didn't have WeChat, so Qin Shi said with a smile, "Add me." "Okay." After exchanging WeChat with Qin Shi, Sun Yuanyuan didn't leave, but kept looking at the photos with the camera. The more she looked at the photos, the more she liked them. Sun Yuanyuan held the camera for a long time. After seeing that the couple didn't leave, she carefully leaned over and asked with a complicated expression, "I think this photo is very good. There's a photography competition next year, can I take it to participate?" "Participate?" Hearing this, Qin Shi suddenly frowned. When Sun Yuanyuan saw his expression, she immediately waved her hand and said anxiously, "It's okay if you can't, I'll take it back and keep it. I promise I won't show it to anyone. I promise." Some people didn't like their photos to be circulated outside, so the little girl was afraid of causing Qin Shi's disgust. If Qin Shi asked her to delete the photos, it would be a tragedy. Qin Ruoying saw the little girl's timid look, so she smiled and said, "I'm fine with it." Then she turned her head and looked at Qin Shi. When Qin Shi made eye contact with her, he suddenly shook his head and laughed. Since his wife said so, what else could he not do? It wasn't that he was ashamed, he just didn't want his photos to be circulated around. Since he was going to participate in a photography competition, a lot of people would definitely see the photos of him and his wife. When Qin Shi thought about how people would judge the photos of him and his wife, he always felt a little strange. However, since Qin Ruoying agreed, he obviously wouldn't refuse, so he nodded and smiled, "No problem." Thank you. The little girl thanked the couple profusely. After saying goodbye to them, she ran away like a thief who had stolen some treasure. The so-called portrait photography was to take the most inadvertently moving picture of you. Just like Xiao Quan, a simple black and white photo was enough to amaze time. People who looked at the photo 20 years later couldn't help but palpitate. Sun Yuanyuan knew that she had taken a good photo. Chapter 182. The three little guys had a lot of fun today. Although it was only 2 hours because it was full of large-scale entertainment facilities, it was very tiring to play. So before the time limit was up, they were already tired and lying in the ocean pool to rest. When they left, they were still a little reluctant. After Qin Shi bought each of them a brown bear school bag, the three little guys were so happy that they started to smile like flowers blooming. After the new year, the winter vacation was almost over and Yin Yin should be sent to kindergarten. He just didn't know if she would be willing to go by then. The two brothers also made a profit today, not to mention that they came to such a high-end children's amusement park for nothing. Qin Shi also took them to the mall and bought new clothes for the little guys and several sets for them. Free food, free accommodation, free play, and before leaving he let them carry big and small bags back home. In the eyes of children, such an elder was simply an angel. By the time the couple left the mall with the children, it was already 3:30 in the afternoon. Because they carried too many things this time, no driver was willing to take the risk of being caught by the traffic police to give them a ride. There was no other way. Qin Ruoying took the three little guys to leave by taxi, and Qin Shi then took another taxi alone. Having said that, they really should buy a car, otherwise it would be really inconvenient to move around in the city. And after buying a car, the couple could take the little guy to the suburbs at any time in the future. That simple life, thinking about it, felt good. Not long after the couple returned to the tea house, Gu Lao hurried over. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried after not seeing his 2 grandchildren for a day. Now there is a saying called skipping a generation, which is the so-called enjoying the grandsons. Elders were closer to their grandchildren than to their children. Gu Lao was a widowed retired old man, and usually only the 2 brothers could relieve his inner loneliness and loneliness. As soon as the 2 brothers saw that their grandfather came back, they proudly took out the clothes and toys that Qin bought for them. Seeing this, Gu Lao immediately frowned. Probably because Qin was still on the side, Gu Lao did not scold the 2 brothers, but quickly took out a stack of money from his pocket. Looking at the red and green colors, it was at least a few hundred yuan. I didn't bring much money today. Take these first. I'll bring you more tomorrow. But how could Qin accept his money? The plate of snacks in front of Big Cat was worth at least a few billion, not to mention a lot. Gu Lao couldn't dissuade Qin. In the end, he had no choice but to slap the 2 brothers' heads and ask them to properly thank Qin. The 2 brothers rubbed their heads in confusion. They didn't know why their grandfather was angry. After chatting with Qin for a while, Gu Lao left with the 2 brothers. After they left, the family of 3 prepared to close up shop and go home. Anyway, the business of the tea house was up to them. Although it was a little early today, it didn't matter. The little girl was still looking forward to going home to show off her new clothes. Night fell. When the little girl fell asleep and Qin Roying began to cultivate, Qin quietly left the courtyard. It was fine that he didn't notice it before, but now that he found out the abnormality, he naturally wanted to find out what was going on. After a while, Qin came to Spirit Mountain again. After landing on the top of the mountain, he closed his eyes and carefully felt it. Not long after, when Qin opened his eyes again, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Last night, he set up a spirit gathering formation and used all his strength, which caused Spirit Mountain to lose at least 10% of the spirit energy of heaven and earth overnight. The spirit energy of heaven and earth was known as the origin of all things. As long as this planet did not become a dead one, then the spirit energy of heaven and earth could be called a renewable energy source like solar energy and water energy. It could be regenerated, but it also needed a process. The spirit energy of heaven and earth here was really plundered by Qin. However, it had only been more than 10 hours and the spirit energy here had already recovered a little. Although it was not much, if Qin hadn't carefully felt it, he wouldn't have even noticed the changes. But at this rate, it was estimated that in a few months, the spirit energy here would be able to recover to its original level. This recovery speed was almost catching up with the heavenly jade domain. What was going on? Because of the damage to his divine sense, he couldn't carefully explore every detail in this mountain range. Since he couldn't use his divine sense, he used the stupidest way to find it bit by bit. This time, Qin didn't fly carelessly, but flew extremely slowly. Like plowing the ground, he plowed Spirit Mountain from beginning to end. However, he spent 2 hours carefully studying Spirit Mountain, but he still didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Everything was so natural. But the more it was like this, the stranger it seemed. Qin had been back on Earth for a while. How could he not know the situation on Earth? Earth was not a dead star and could still produce spirit energy of heaven and earth. But the speed was like a locked faucet, only opened a little, so it took half a day to fill a basin of wash water. But now, it was like a faucet burst. As soon as the faucet was opened, the water gushed out crazily. This speed was almost catching up with the heavenly jade domain. What kind of place was the heavenly jade domain? It was a cultivation holy land that could give birth to an immortal emperor. Just like a dam that had just been opened, the water level downstream would not rise in a short time. But if this continued, then the spirit energy of heaven and earth would continue to increase. If this continued, earth would inevitably become the second heavenly jade domain. Earth's spirit energy, recovered? As soon as this thought appeared in Qin's mind, his heart couldn't help but jump, and his whole body couldn't help but tremble. This matter involved too much, and even Qin was a little shocked. In order to verify his guess, Qin pondered for a while, then rushed to the sky and went straight to the Qinling Mountains, because he was familiar with that place. After the spirit binding array was activated, it set off a tide of spirit energy. Now that the array had been destroyed, the accumulation of the village for hundreds of years was also destroyed. Logically speaking, the spirit energy of that place would inevitably drop by a level. So he only needed to go there and take a look to know what was going on. The moonlight in the Qinling Mountains was very bright. The moonlight was like a silver radiance, shining on the piles of snow and reflecting the cold light, illuminating everything around. The village had been reduced to ruins and the villagers had all left. In the center of the ruins, There was a huge semicircular crater left behind after the battle between Qin Shi and the Immortal General. Immortal cultivators were not nuclear bombs, and after collision, there would be no radiation. Instead, a lot of true essence would escape. True essence was the product of refining the spirit energy of heaven and earth, so the deepest part of the crater was the place with the densest spirit energy. In the huge crater, a tulip was leisurely blooming in it. Tulips were very resistant to cold, and could withstand a low temperature of -35 degrees Celsius in winter. When the temperature returned to above 8 degrees Celsius, it could begin to grow. But under the stimulation of the surging spirit energy, this tulip actually bloomed in this cold winter. The spirit energy of heaven and earth here had actually recovered to the level before the array was destroyed. Qin Shi frowned as he floated above the ruins, staring at the deep crater in front of him in a daze. Suddenly a thought jumped out of his mind. Immortal General of Tianmen? Tide of spirit energy? Chapter 183. There were some things that one wouldn't know if one didn't want to know. Because the spirit energy on Earth was too sparse, Qin Shi had never paid attention to the ancient legacies on Earth. It was like letting a wolf into a flock of sheep. He ate and slept every day. Why should he think so much? To put it bluntly, he didn't feel threatened. After all, this wasn't the heavenly jade world. Spirit energy was like oxygen. It flowed. Therefore, even if some places had high levels of oxygen and some had low levels of oxygen, there would never be a situation where there wasn't any oxygen at all. If the heavenly jade world was compared to a bathtub, then Earth was a bucket. If he scooped up a bowl of water from the bucket, it would reduce the water in the bucket by a large amount. But what if the bucket turned into a lake with running water and a stable supply of water? As a deity transformation cultivator, it was simply impossible for him to drain a cultivation planet that was as beautiful as heavenly jade. At the current rate of development, it was only a matter of time before Earth turned into a cultivation planet. In Qin Shi's knowledge, this was already beyond the scope of a cultivator's ability. Even an immortal emperor couldn't turn a declining cultivation planet with sparse spirit energy into a cultivation holy land with abundant spirit energy. What was going on? Qin Shi silently looked at the ruins in front of him. Although there were thousands of doubts in his heart, no one could answer him. After all, who in this world could compare to him in terms of understanding and comprehension of the world's spirit energy and the heavenly Tao? If even he couldn't explain it, who could? A bone-chilling wind howled. Even with Qin Shi's cultivation, he actually felt a chill that he hadn't felt in a long time. He seemed to know too little about Earth and his own home planet. In fact, if one really wanted to delve deeper into it, the biggest question in front of Qin Shi was, how did he get to the heavenly jade world? How did he get there? Who sent him there? How did he get there? Even soul formation cultivators would be severely injured after crossing the void and returning. How did he wake up to the heavenly jade world as a mere mortal? Why? Was it all just a dream? Because only in a dream would such a fantastic story appear. As a spirit-severing cultivator, he had already experienced countless trials and tribulations. So how could he not know whether this was a dream or not? If it wasn't a dream, then what kind of terrifying unknown existence was it? Thinking of this, Qin Shi couldn't help but feel inexplicably irritated. He had been cultivating for 500 years, and it was only at this moment that he suddenly realized something. It turned out that he was still an ant-like existence in front of some unknown power. All of a sudden he felt an extremely stifling sensation. After returning to Earth, even though he was half-crippled, Qin Shi could still be said to be the most powerful person in the world. However, as long as he didn't step into the immortal emperor realm, he would always be immortal. How insignificant were mortals! Even if he had reached the soul formation stage, he would only be one of the stronger ants among thousands of ants. Under the frosty snow and the bright moon, Qin Shi's lonely figure floated in the air. He looked up at the bright moon. Then he suddenly looked up to the sky and roared. Surging true core strength kept surging out of his body. As his sleeves fluttered, an invisible shockwave spread out wildly with him as the center. Boom, boom, boom. It was like a bomber carrying out a carpet bombing. With Qin Shi as the center, wherever the true essence spread out, all the rocks and vegetation would explode and scatter in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the already incomparably huge crater was actually expanded by him once more. A sword and a knife appeared in Qin Shi's hands again. However, just as he was about to merge the sword and knife, Qin Shi's mind suddenly flashed with the smiling faces of Qin Ruoying and Yin Yin. The frost sword and knife turned into snowflakes again and fell one after another. Then Qin Shi's figure suddenly disappeared above the ruins. The next morning, Maybe it was because of the time they spent together that the husband and wife almost reached the level of telepathy. Therefore, after Qin Ruoying got up, she felt that something was wrong with Chen Shi today, but she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. After serving the little fellow breakfast, Qin Ruoying helped Chen Shi pack up as usual. When she was about to take the little fellow to the tea house, Chen Shi suddenly spoke. "Ying, you can practice at home. I'll take Nian to the tea house." Qin Ruoying's face suddenly showed a big question mark. She looked at Chen Shi, but Chen Shi was smiling. She couldn't see anything strange from his face. Qin Ruoying was silent for a while, then asked seriously, "Why? Your cultivation progress is too slow. The beginning is the time to lay the foundation. If the early progress is too slow, it will affect your future development." As he spoke, Chen Shi touched her smooth face. As if to prevent her from thinking too much, Chen Shi paused. Before she could speak, he continued to add, "Wasn't it to cultivate feelings with Nian before? I think it's about time to cultivate. We can't be around the child all day, right? I don't care, but it will affect your cultivation. Didn't you say you would accompany me for 500 years? If you don't cultivate, how can you accompany me?" "Okay, I see." Qin Ruoying nodded, then turned to look at the little fellow who had run out of the west wing. Seeing this, Chen Shi called the little fellow and said to her, "Nian, Mom has to study today, so I can't accompany you to the tea house. Dad will go with you, okay?" After hearing Chen Shi's words, the little fellow tilted her head and thought for a while, then grinned and said, "Okay. Mom, you can do it. You have to study hard. Good girl, Mua. Come say goodbye to Mom." Chen Shi picked up the little fellow, and the little fellow waved goodbye to Qin Ruoying obediently. "Goodbye, Mom. Good girl, you can go." Qin Ruoying sent the father and daughter to the door. After watching their figures disappear at the end of the alley, she couldn't help but sigh. With her understanding of Chen Shi, how could she not notice the difference in Chen Shi? She chose not to ask, not because she didn't care, but to express a kind of support. No matter what Chen Shi wanted to do, she would support him. Since Chen Shi wanted her to concentrate on cultivation, then she would concentrate on cultivation. As for the rest, she believed that Chen Shi would arrange it well. Qin Ruoying returned to her room and began to cultivate in seclusion. Chen Shi took the little fellow to the tea house. As soon as they entered the tea house, the little fellow ran to the children's park and waited for the arrival of the brothers. Chen Shi made himself a cup of tea and sat behind the bar, silently watching the little fellow. Chen Shi didn't know how long the recovery of spirit qi would last. If it was just a temporary situation, it would be fine. But what if it would last for a long time? When the earth really changed from a planet in the age of chaos to a holy land for cultivation, what kind of changes would the world usher in? Everything was unknown. Human beings would always be afraid of the unknown. Since that was the case, it would be better for him to become stronger before that. Chapter 184. 11 o'clock in the morning. Gu Lao brought the two brothers to the tea house. He was slightly surprised that he didn't see Qin Ruoying today. In his impression, this young couple was inseparable. Even if they had to go out for business, it was usually Chen Shi who went out, and Qin Ruoying stayed behind to take care of the children. Although he was puzzled, Gu Lao wasn't a gossipy old man. After taking the green tea that Chen Shi brewed for him, he laughed and said, "Today's weather is good. Although the sun isn't out, I feel refreshed. When people get old, they tend to lose focus. It's rare for me to be so clear-headed. I'm really not used to it. Come. Since I'm in good spirits today, let's have a good fight." Gu Lao was in high spirits today, and it was obvious that he was in good spirits. However, his words made Chen Shi frown slightly. In order to not let Gu Lao notice his abnormality, Chen Shi immediately smiled and said, "Wait a moment, I'll go get the chess pieces." The so-called spring sleepiness, autumn lack, summer naps, and winter sleeps. Once winter came, the human body would be affected and stimulated by the low temperature, causing the capillaries under the skin to begin to contract. The blood flow would be relatively reduced, and the sweat glands and pores would close to reduce heat emission to maintain the normal body temperature. This was a biological instinct, so when winter came, everyone would feel sleepy and unable to wake up. Today wasn't a sunny day. Although it wasn't snowing, the thick dark clouds still covered a large part of the sun, and the temperature outside was estimated to be around 0 degrees. The reason why Gu Lao was in good spirits was clearly because of the recovery of spiritual energy, causing the spiritual energy in Hohai to skyrocket. It was almost at the level of Zongnanhai. Living in such a place, of course, one would feel refreshed. What would the rich spiritual energy directly affect? For immortal cultivators, cultivation would become easier, and even achieve twice the result with half the effort. Although mortals didn't know how to cultivate, if they lived in such a place with rich spiritual energy for a long time, their physical condition would become better and better, so much so that they would be immune to all diseases and live a long life. There were longevity villages all over the world, and these villages all had one thing in common, which was excellent geographical location. Deep canyons, lush forests, birds, flowers, and mountain springs. These places were called paradise and at the same time, the best place to cultivate in seclusion. It was actually very easy to find a paradise. Wherever the average lifespan of the villagers was more than 80 years old, that place must be a paradise. Huaxia's leaders had a long lifespan. In addition to the professional healthcare team, the blessed land was also a big factor. Although mortals couldn't detect the existence of spiritual energy, they wouldn't know whether the place was good or not. A's days long's a long time. Only one night had passed and even Gu Lao was affected. His spirit had also become much better. Thinking of this, Qin Shi asked Gu Lao to wait for a while, and then he got up and went back to the bar and then called Qin Xueqing. The last time he called, Qin Xueqing didn't pick up and she didn't call back. Qin Shi thought she was busy, so she threw the matter to the back of her mind. Now it seemed that this matter wasn't that simple. The phone went through and after a while, Qin Xueqing's voice came from the other side. Hello. It's me, are you busy? I have a question to ask you. Give me a second. Qin Xueqing was a little noisy on the other side. After a while, her voice came from the phone again. Okay, go ahead. She was his sister-in-law, so Qin Shi didn't dawdle with her and went straight to the topic. Have you Wulian people noticed anything unusual recently? Like a vision of heaven and earth? After hearing his question, Qin Xueqing was obviously shocked, and she hurriedly asked on the other side of the phone, Who told you? Do I need someone to tell me? Qin Shi replied matter-of-factly, and Qin Xueqing suddenly choked. After all, she had already experienced the strength of her cheap brother-in-law. Because Qin Shi's question involved some secrets, after hesitating for a while, Qin Xueqing whispered, Yes, a large oasis suddenly appeared in the Taklamakan desert, and it's spreading out at an astonishing speed. Do you think plants need time to grow? But that place turned from a desert to an oasis overnight, which is obviously a supernatural phenomenon, so the Wu Lian blocked the news immediately. The desert turned into an oasis? Qin Shi thought for a while and then asked again, What else? Are there any changes in animals? For example, monsters and other existences, have there been more? Yes, it is said that a forest ranger saw a monster more than 3 meters tall in Shenangjia. The Wu Lian has sent people but they haven't found any trace of the monster yet. Sure enough, the recovery of spirit power would bring great changes to the world. The desert turning into an oasis was only the first step, and there would be more and more wonders that ordinary people could not imagine. Maybe in the future the earth would become like the Tianxian world. Qin Xueqing waited for a while, and seeing that Qin Shi didn't reply, she asked directly, Do you know something? Her question interrupted Qin Shi's thoughts. After thinking for a while, Qin Shi gave an irrelevant answer. You should cultivate according to the cultivation method I gave you. According to the current situation, you should be able to step into the foundation establishment stage very soon. At that time, you will naturally know what happened in this world. Foundation establishment. Qin Shi gave her the cultivation method, but he didn't teach her the general knowledge of the cultivation world, so Qin Xueqing was still a little confused about the specific realm, and could only practice according to the cultivation method every day in a daze. Qin Xueqing always felt that her cheap brother-in-law might know something, so she kept asking over the phone. However, Qin Shi didn't answer her questions at all but said directly, That's it, I'll hang up first. Everything happened too suddenly and the time was still short, so Qin Shi couldn't make any conclusions for the time being. There was always a process to everything, and instead of making wild guesses, it was better to see the results when the time came. Hey, wait, you said that as long as I form the golden core, my broken arm will be able to recover. Then Qi refinement, foundation establishment, golden core. What's above that? What level are you at? Soul formation. After saying that, Qin Shi didn't say anything more and directly hung up the phone. Hearing the beeping sound of the phone, Qin Xueqing couldn't help but think over and over again. Qi refinement, foundation establishment, golden core. Soul formation. Chapter 185. For the next few days, Qin Shi would bring the little girl to the tea house to date with the brothers every day. Qin Ruoying, on the other hand, was cultivating hard at home. Out of the 24 hours in a day, she really did cultivate for 20 hours. Cultivation was a boring thing to begin with. Since she had already decided to embark on this path, learning to enjoy the boredom and experiencing different kinds of pleasure from cultivation was the only thing Qin Ruoying had to do at the moment. She had been paying attention to the news reports during this period. In addition, he was also constantly paying attention to the headlines, Weibo, public accounts, and other media platforms. Things were different now. With the arrival of the mobile internet era, even the old man selling pancakes on the street learned to use QR codes to collect money. If there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth, it would inevitably cause a big social sensation. Even if the government deliberately blocked it, there would always be some gossip circulating on the internet. But to Qin Shi's surprise, a few days had passed, and he couldn't find any news about the supernatural phenomenon of the desert turning into an oasis on the internet. With his sister-in-law's personality, he basically ruled out the possibility that she would joke with Qin Shi. Since he couldn't see it on the internet, it was either blocked by the government immediately, or because that place was so remote that not many people knew about it. However, it was understandable when he thought about it. The recovery of spirit qi would definitely affect those inaccessible places first, which gave the government some time to react. The Wulian people were probably out in full force and on standby at any time. Why was Qin Shi paying so much attention? Because this was also a big event that could affect him. Not to mention why a planet in the age of chaos suddenly became a holy land for cultivation. There must be a big secret hidden in how he got to the heavenly jade realm. 5 years on Earth, 500 years on heavenly jade. This involved time and space, which was obviously not a level that soul formation cultivators could understand. What kind of existence was capable of doing all this? Magic treasure? Spell? Array? Or human? Why did it choose him? And not someone else? Ever since Qin Shi discovered the recovery of spirit qi, these questions had been constantly flashing in his mind. It was true that he had 500 years of experience in the heavenly jade domain, but in essence, Qin Shi had always been the kind of person who would be satisfied as long as he had a wife and children, a hot pit, porridge, steamed buns, and 2 tails of wine. There was no shortage of ambitious great men in the world, but there was no shortage of contented mortals like Qin Shi. As long as his wife and daughter were well and his family was harmonious, he could guard this small tea house and live happily for the rest of his life. Some people always believed that contentment equated to lack ambition. In fact, this was a sign of ignorance. It was perhaps the biggest joke in the world for a person who didn't have a strong heart to turn around and laugh at a person who had a strong heart. As the song goes, you are not truly happy, your smile is just a camouflage you wear. Being content with what one has doesn't mean that one won't be vigilant in times of peace. Being vigilant in times of peace did not mean that one would have groundless fears. The torrent of the era was coming, and Qin Shi just wanted to continue her role as a spectator. Having seen all the prosperity of the world, one should naturally float like water. December 12th, Qin Yongyan, who had been in seclusion, was also called out by Qin Ruoying. Her sister-in-law's phone couldn't be reached, so the family of 4 took a taxi and went straight to the Badaling Great Wall. They were going to hold a strange wedding with no ceremony and no guests, only a father-in-law, wife, and son-in-law. No, there was also a daughter. Qin Ruoying originally wanted to persuade Qin Shi to forget about it. After all, Nianyan was already so old, and they had already gotten a marriage certificate. It felt a little strange to specially do this now. Although she had originally wanted to marry Qin Shi under her father's witness, she didn't need to do any ceremony. She didn't need any grand ceremony. As long as her father, second uncle's family, and Aunt Zhang were present, Qin Ruoying would be satisfied. But second uncle hadn't come back yet, and Lin Qing was busy all day. In this winter, she couldn't specially invite Aunt Zhang to come to Shangjing to enjoy the cold wind, could she? She was overwhelmed by the joy of returning home, so she agreed to Qin Shi in a daze. Otherwise, she would have to think about it carefully and choose a good day. For example, after the new year, when the winter was over and the flowers bloomed in spring, it would be good. However, Qin Ruoying wanted to change the day, but Qin Shi didn't agree. What a joke, how could he delay the matter of marrying a wife? It didn't matter if his family and friends were not there, as long as his father-in-law was there. The ceremony was not important, but the intention was important. Qin Shi didn't tell the little fellow what they were going to do today. He just said that he was going to take her for an outing, which made the little fellow very happy and excited. Qin Yongyan seemed to want to cultivate a relationship with the little fellow, so as soon as they got in the car, he let the little fellow sit on his lap and then let the little fellow climb around him. The Badaling Great Wall in December was not as lively as the National Day. Because it was in the mountains, the wind was particularly strong, and the temperature was several degrees lower than that in the city. The family of 4 bought the tickets and went up the Great Wall under the astonished gazes of the staff. The weather was too cold, and there were basically no tourists on the Great Wall at this time. The bare mountains were covered with snow everywhere. The cold wind whistled past. Afraid that the child would be cold, Chin-shi wrapped the little fellow with jinchi. The most beautiful scenery on the Great Wall was in autumn. Because there were many maple trees planted in this area, in autumn, standing on the Great Wall and looking down, one would see the maple leaves below as red as fire, which could be said to reflect the ancient Great Wall. This was also a great beauty in Shangjing. So, was the Great Wall not beautiful in winter? No. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only luxuriant. Taizu only used such a poem to accurately summarize the beauty of the Great Wall in winter. Boundless and vigorous. Qin Yongyan held the little fellow and followed Chin-shi to the beacon tower on the north 5th floor. Seeing that he stopped moving forward, she asked with a smile, "What do you want to do for your wedding? Can you tell me now?" Chin-shi had been mysterious today. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, Qin Ruoying immediately turned to look at Chin-shi. She also wanted to see how Chin-shi was going to hold the wedding. Hearing this, Chin-shi smiled mysteriously at them, then turned and walked to the edge of the Great Wall. Immediately after, he pointed to the vast mountains covered with snow in front of him and said to Qin Ruoying with a smile, "Why do we have to hold a wedding? Because a wedding is not a formality, it can bring a sense of ceremony to us. A sense of ceremony can make us more deeply remember everything that is happening now. Life is dull. No matter how passionate two people are when they are in love, when they are together, it will become daily necessities and domestic affairs. Dull life always tends to wear away our edges and make us forget who we were in the beginning. That's why people try their best to think of all kinds of romantic festivals and ceremonies. They want to use the sense of ceremony to remind themselves not to forget their original intentions. Just like the saying goes, life is not just about the present, there is also poetry in the future. Since ceremonies are all thought of by people, then I can also think of a ceremony that is different from others. A ceremony that belongs only to us." Speaking of this, Chin-shi winked at Qin Ruoying, making her laugh. "Only you can do it." Perhaps because Qin Yongyan and the little guy were still next to her, Qin Ruoying's face showed a bit of a shy expression for the first time. Chin-shi did not know if he was thick-skinned or not, but in short, he completely ignored his father-in-law and focused all his attention on Qin Ruoying. At this moment he only had eyes for her. After gazing at the lover in front of him affectionately, the love in Chin-shi's heart suddenly gushed out like spring water. He turned around and faced the mountains. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only luxuriance. Chin-shi suddenly waved his hand and motioned for Qin Ruoying to come to his side. Qin Ruoying stood beside him and glanced at the barren mountains below. She suddenly had some doubts. What was there to see in this place? At this moment, Chin-shi suddenly shouted at the mountains in front of him, "Ying, deep feelings are not as good as long-term companionship. There is no need to say more about love. Today I will let Qingshan wear red makeup for you." As soon as his voice fell, Chin-shi suddenly stepped on the ground. The true essence that he had accumulated for 500 years burst out in an instant, crazily gushing out from his body, suddenly shaking the whole mountain range. With Chin-shi as the center, the invisible true essence continued to spread out. In an instant, it was as if the god of spring had issued an edict. Wherever the true essence reached, flowers and trees bloomed. But the most abundant thing here was not flowers but maple trees. On the snow-covered mountains, countless bare tree trunks suddenly sprouted, and new leaves grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Like a landscape painting that had been splashed with paint, the barren mountains in front of them were instantly dyed green. Following that, the green turned to yellow, then red, until the forest was dyed with layers of green and gold. Chapter 186. Wow! The little fellow looked at the magical scene in front of her, and her little mouth couldn't help but turn into an O shape. She sat in Qin Yongyan's arms and couldn't help but feel a little excited when she saw the fiery red leaves on the mountain. Grandpa, I want to go and see. Come over a bit." The little fellow wriggled her body and signaled Qin Yongyan to take her to the edge of the city wall. She wanted to take a closer look at the bright red maple leaves that covered the whole mountain. Qin Yongyan finally came back to his senses after being shaken by her. The heavy snow had passed, and in the blink of an eye, it was the winter solstice. It was supposed to be the late winter when everything was dormant, but Chin-shi's words actually made the plants on the mountain grow in reverse. In an instant they had sprouted, grown leaves, sprouted stems, bloomed flowers and bore fruit. According to legend, there were immortals in ancient times whose words contained the heavenly laws. What was the difference between Qinshi's action and that of the immortals? A moment ago it was still a barren mountain and the next moment, it was full of vegetation. Qin Yongyan was really shocked and inexplicably. The impact of this scene on him was even more violent than when Qinshi killed great-granduncle. What kind of cultivation method did Qinshi make him practice? Could it really be the immortals' inheritance? After this period of cultivation, Qin Yongyan was about to step into the late stage of qi refining, so his understanding of immortal cultivators was much deeper than before. Every realm of immortal cultivators could be divided into 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the end. For example, Qin Yongyan had already gone through 2 stages: the early stage of qi condensation, the middle stage of body tempering, and the late stage of aperture opening, which was about to step into. Once all the apertures were opened, then he could step into the second major realm of immortal cultivation, foundation establishment. It was also because of this that there was a huge gap between the early stage of golden core and the middle stage of golden core. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but frown and silently glance at his son-in-law several times. He was now a little curious. What was Qinshi's cultivation level? Just as Qin Yongyan was blindly pondering, the little fellow in his arms suddenly giggled. The child didn't understand so much. She only knew that the scenery in front of her was very beautiful, so she wrapped one arm around Qin Yongyan's neck and pointed at the maple leaves below the city wall with the other hand. She kept muttering that it was so beautiful. The mountain full of maple leaves facing the morning sun, the green mountain for you in red makeup. Qinshi's ceremony was so shocking that Qin Ruoying held her lover's hand tightly and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Due to the presence of his father-in-law, Qinshi did not do anything too intimate. He gently squeezed Qin Ruoying's delicate hand, then turned to look at his lover and asked with a smile, "What do you think? Do you like it?" The cold winter wind whistled past. Qin Ruoying's red lips slightly opened as she muttered, "I like, as long as you like it." Qinshi smiled and didn't say anything else. It was just as he had said. Deep feelings were not as good as long-term companionship. This was the truth of the world. 20 minutes later, the family of 4 left the Great Wall. At this time, many local residents who heard the news had gathered at the ticket office at the foot of the mountain, ready to go up the mountain to see what was going on. This place was 1,000 meters above sea level. Even if it was a sunny day, the temperature was far below zero. The mountain full of maple trees bloomed in this season of frost. It could be said that the rain hit the pine trees green, and the frost dyed the maple leaves red. It was a wonderful scene. If nothing unexpected happened, this supernatural phenomenon would cause a sensation in the country in half an hour, and even attract the attention of foreign media. There was no ceremony, no guests, and even the most common bowing to heaven and earth, then to parents and then to husband and wife. Qinshi naturally called out "Dad," which made Qin Yongyan and Qin Ruoying laugh. The little girl didn't know why her mother and grandfather were so happy, but when she saw that they were happy, she was also very happy. She lay on Qin Yongyan's shoulder and kept giggling. When they went home, the family of 4 didn't go directly home. Instead, they went to Quanzhou to treat the little girl to a meal of authentic Shangjing roast duck. When it came to eating roast duck, the duck leg was obviously the child's favorite part. In order to make it easier for the little girl to eat, Qin Ruoying specifically told the waiter not to keep the duck leg for her. After the dishes were served, the little girl proudly held a duck leg in each hand and gnawed on it until her mouth was full of oil. Today the 2 brothers weren't around. The little girl bit the duck leg and suddenly remembered her other little friend, Big Cat. Recently, the little girl didn't disturb the big cat, so it was happy to be free. Moreover, it was allowed by Qinshi to stay at home and practice all day long like Qin Ruoying. It didn't even need to go out. It was very leisurely all day long. They were sitting in a private room with a TV in it. As expected, during the afternoon news, Shangjing TV station broadcasted a special interview about the wonders of Bada Ling. Could only be said that the response was really fast. They even specially invited 2 professors from Tsinghua University, a botanist and a meteorologist. Perhaps it was because some departments had informed them in advance, so the 2 experts explained the reasons for the audience in front of the TV from a scientific point of view. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying knocked on Qinshi's bowl with his chopsticks. It seemed that he wanted Qinshi to see what he had just done. Qinshi smiled and didn't take it to heart. The movement he made seemed spectacular, but in fact, it could only last for a short period of time. At the latest, the flowers and trees would all wither and go dormant the day after tomorrow. They would only be rejuvenated when spring came. Compared with the Taklamakan Desert becoming an oasis, it was simply dwarfed. Just take it as a warning to the people of the country in advance. If they saw any strange scenes in the future, they wouldn't be so surprised. After lunch, the family returned to the courtyard. The little girl specially left a duck leg for the big cat. As soon as she got home, she rushed to the main hall. Big cat, where are you? I'll treat you to a duck leg. Meow, the sound came from the roof. The little girl looked up and found that the big cat had actually jumped onto the roof beam. As soon as it saw the duck leg in the little girl's hand, it immediately jumped down from the roof beam and then circled around the little girl, wagging its tail. This guy was also a foodie. The duck leg was cold, but it didn't mind at all. Eat slowly. I'll give it all to you. The little girl touched the big cat's hair and said to it earnestly. She stood in the courtyard. After hearing what the little girl said to the big cat, he couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. The big cat had lived for many years, but now it was being treated as a child younger than it was by a 4-year-old child. The little girl was taking care of the big cat. This scene looked inexplicably harmonious. It was already afternoon, so they didn't go to the tea house today. She accompanied the little girl to watch cartoons in the West Wing, and Chin Roying went to the East Wing to cultivate. The recovery of spiritual power was something she had never experienced before. So even he didn't know what kind of changes it would bring to the world. However, she speculated that the recovery of spiritual power would first affect the natural environment. After the environment changed, flowers and plants would also be affected. Then it would affect birds and animals until it affected humans. How long this recovery of spiritual power would last and how long this evolution process would take were still unknown. Chapter 187. There was nothing to talk about these days. In a flash, it was the beginning of January. There were 3 hottest days in summer and 3 coldest days in winter. The third 9 days after the winter solstice was also the coldest time of the year. Because it was winter, ice had already formed in Hohai before the end of the 3rd and 9th day. Now that the lake was frozen, the anticipated ice skating rink was about to open. This was a big event that would be on the news. After the news was broadcast, Hohai, which was deserted a few days ago, finally ushered in the most lively time of the winter. After breakfast, she had just walked out of Dongming Alley with the little fellow when a burst of lively noise came from afar. Just like going to the countryside to go to the market, the father and daughter turned the corner and came to the street outside the tea house, only to find that a lot of people suddenly appeared on the lakeside of Hohai. As the holy land of skating in the eyes of the old Shangjing people, once the Shikahai ice rink opened, even if they lived outside the 3rd ring road, they would still come to play. This was the feeling. Because they were poor in the past, there were not so many entertainment projects. Swimming in summer and skating in winter naturally became the first choice of entertainment for the people. The little fellow was stunned. When they left yesterday, there was not even a ghost here. How did this place become as lively as a market in just one night? Looking around, the lakeside of Hohai was already full of red lanterns, and very festive music was playing in the ice rink. It was as if there was going to be a festival and the atmosphere was very festive. It was now 9 o'clock in the morning. When the father and daughter walked into the tea house, the ice rink was not open yet, so most of the people were concentrated on the streets on both sides of the lake. The staff of the Sports Bureau, the Public Security Bureau, the Safety Supervision Bureau and other departments were conducting ice testing inspection on the Shikahai ice rink. After the inspection, the Shikahai ice rink could officially open for business. She had just hung the open for business sign when 2 young people with ice skates came in. Boss, 2 cups of vegetarian tea. The ice testing inspection generally took about 2 hours. The young people did not want to stand outside in the cold wind, so they came in. There was heating in the tea house, so it was very warm and comfortable as soon as they came in. In addition, Shi would light an incense when he had nothing to do, so the smell in the tea house became very good, so it gave people a feeling that they did not want to go out again. Because he had to boil the water, it took him nearly 20 minutes to brew the first pot of tea. Just as he delivered the 2 cups of tea to the young man, the tea house welcomed a new customer. There were 5 or 6 guests, men and women, old and young. It was obvious that they were a big family. This was the earliest day of business since Shi took over the tea house. It could only be said that the peak season came too suddenly. The little girl sat in the children's playground, looking at the guests who kept coming in. Her little face was full of surprise. She was very sensible. When she saw that Shi was alone, he had to greet the guests and pour tea for them. The little fellow took the initiative to run to Chen-Shi's side. She raised her head and said sweetly, "Papa, let me help you." "Good girl." Chen-Shi smiled and stroked the little fellow's head. Then he handed a cup of green tea to her and said, "Come on, give it to that uncle and then to sister. Be careful, don't fall." Yeah. The little fellow nodded like she was pounding garlic. Then she carefully took the teacup in Chen-Shi's hand. Because she was afraid of spilling the tea, the little fellow straightened her back and her whole little face became serious. The guests were a young couple. After the little fellow put the teacup on the guest table, she smiled sweetly and said, "Uncle, have some tea." The young man, who was estimated to be in his 20s, was stunned by her calling him uncle. Before he could come back to his senses, the little girl had already run back to the bar counter and brought over another cup of tea. "Sister, have some tea." The two guests were obviously a couple. As a result, the little fellow called the man uncle and the woman sister, which immediately made them laugh. "This child is so cute." "Yes, why don't we have a child?" "Get out." The guests came one after another without stopping. So, just after 10 o'clock, the tea house was already full. The little fellow sat on Chen-Shi's lap and put her head on the bar. Her big round eyes kept scanning the tea house lobby in front of her, and she couldn't help giggling. "Papa, business is good today." The business was good and the little fellow was very proud, so she didn't go to the children's playground today. Instead, she sat at the bar and waited for the guests to greet her. Whenever she heard a customer shouting for more water, the little girl would run over with a small water bottle in her arms. To her, this kind of menial task of pouring tea was more fun than stacking blocks. According to his usual habits, Gu Lao usually came to the tea house after 11 o'clock. It was estimated that he also knew the news of the opening of the Shikahai skating rink today, so he came much earlier than usual. As soon as the two brothers entered the door, they were immediately stunned by the lively scene in front of them. "You're here." As soon as she saw her friends coming, the little fellow excitedly waved to the two brothers. There were no seats in the tea house, so Chen-Shi asked Gu Lao to sit behind the bar, and the three little guys went back to their exclusive children's playground. About half an hour later, someone suddenly shouted, "The ice rink is open." This sentence was like throwing a match into a pile of explosives, causing a violent reaction in an instant. The guests asked Chen-Shi to pay the bill. As soon as he reported a number before he walked out of the bar, the guests had taken the initiative to give him the money and then quickly walked out of the tea house. In less than 10 minutes, the tea house, which was full of guests just now, was deserted again, leaving only countless empty teacups and melon seed shells on the ground. Seeing this, Gu Lao called out the three little guys and then arranged work for them. The elder brother wiped the table, the younger brother swept the floor, and the little one was responsible for setting the chairs. After cleaning up the tea house, Chen-Shi calculated the income of this morning. In less than 2 hours, the tea house had earned 1,500 yuan. Today was also the only profitable day since he took over the tea house. After calculating the account without waiting for the three little guys to speak, Gu Lao asked with a smile, "I'm old and can't run anymore. Why don't you take them out to play and I'll guard the shop for you?" Hearing this, Chen-Shi glanced at the three little guys who were lying by the window and watching the fun, and said with a smile, "Okay, then you have a good rest here and I'll take them out to play." Why was the tea house doing well? Because not far from the door was the fourth entrance of the Shikahai ice rink. The total area of the Shikahai ice rink was as high as 160,000 square meters, and there were as many as 10 ice entertainment projects. In addition to the traditional ice skating, there were also ice bicycles, ice motorcycles, ice slides, ice hockey, ice bumper cars, and so on. In addition, according to the area, the Shikahai ice rink was also divided into a free entertainment area, a comprehensive skating area, an ice hockey area, a speed skating area, an ice golf area, an ice bed passage, and a special children's entertainment area. How could the small artificial ice rink in the shopping mall be comparable to such a huge skating rink? As soon as they entered the ice rink, Chen-Shi rented an ice car for the three little guys. The so-called ice car was actually a simple sleigh with a row of iron stools welded on 2 iron bars. Chen-Shi sat in the front and the three little guys sat behind him. After shouting, "Take off," Chen-Shi took 2 thin iron bars and kept drawing on the ground. Just like a boatman paddling as he slid hard, he suddenly pulled the three little guys on the ice. Chapter 188. Ice carts were a common entertainment in winter in the north, but they were rare in the south. Many southerners probably hadn't even seen what ice carts looked like. The so-called ice carts were actually invented to allow people who didn't know how to skate to experience the fun of ice skating. The three little guys played for a while. When they saw people constantly passing by them on ice skates, their interest was aroused. Thus, they were no longer satisfied with the ice carts and clamored for Chin-shi to teach them how to skate. Learning to skate was actually similar to learning to swim. Some people could learn it in an hour or two while others couldn't learn it in a week or two. Seeing that the three little guys were so enthusiastic, Chin-shi couldn't persuade them, so he rented 3 pairs of ice skates for them and took them to the skating area. Ice skates were a very magical thing in the eyes of the little guy. After Chin-shi helped her put on the skates, she couldn't help but touch the ice skates under the skates. Then she kicked her little feet and scraped a layer of ice on the ground with the ice skates. Looking at her smug look, she was probably very happy in her heart. After Chin-shi drove the ice carts to the skating area with the 3 little guys, the little guy eagerly wanted to get off the ice carts. Newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. The little guy didn't care so much and wanted to stand up directly when she stepped on the ice. Children who were just over 4 years old could suddenly fall down while walking on the road, let alone on ice. Sure enough, just as the little guy stood up from the ice carts, her right foot suddenly slipped and her small body suddenly fell backward. At such a critical moment, naturally he had to act as a father. Chin-shi was also prepared. As soon as the little girl fell down, he had already reached his hand behind the little girl's back and helped her stand up again. This scared the little guy. After holding Chin-shi's arm and standing firm, she didn't dare to let go. Trying to scrape her feet on the ground twice, the little guy shouted at Chin-shi with a frightened face, "Papa! I can't stand up." Before Chin-shi could reply, the brother sitting on the ice carts immediately responded, "Grandpa said that ice is very slippery. That's why we can't stand on the ice. You have to hold on to something." The 2 brothers grew up in Hohai, so they had come here to play a long time ago. However, at this time last year they were only 3 years old. It was obviously impossible for Gu Lao to teach them to skate. The 2 brothers had been longing for ice skating for a long time. Looking at her brother's serious face, Chin-shi couldn't help but laugh. "Come Nyan, come here. Daddy will support you." After holding the little fellow's hand and standing on the ice, Chin-shi slowly dragged her to his side. Then he turned to the brothers and said, "You 2 stay in the car. Uncle will teach your sister how to skate first, okay?" "All right." The 2 brothers nodded and then sat on the ice carriage obediently, watching the little guy carefully step forward under Chin-shi's guidance. Skating was actually a kind of muscle memory. No matter how good a skater was, if they hadn't skated for decades they might fall when they stepped on the ice again. Children learn things very quickly. Under normal circumstances, Chin-shi should be able to teach the little fellow to skate in an afternoon. However, because there were still 2 brothers waiting in line, Chin-shi could only give the little fellow a cheat. He first let the little fellow try to learn how to stand on the ice. Then, the little fellow raised her hands and let Chin-shi hold her hands from above. With Chin-shi's help, the little fellow quickly adapted to the feeling of standing on the ice. After she adapted, Chin-shi said softly, "Nyan, be good. Daddy will support you. Slowly move forward. Look, just like that, uncle, move." Although her father was next to her, the little fellow was still very afraid that she would suddenly fall. Chin-shi held her hand and patiently encouraged her several times. Then, the little fellow carefully tried to take a step forward. "Very good. Now we have to learn from that, uncle, and let ourselves float." In the eyes of outsiders they were a pair of father and daughter who were learning to skate. But in fact at this moment, the little fellow's whole body was wrapped in Chin-shi's true essence. As soon as the little fellow took a step forward, Chin-shi used his true essence to push her into a standard posture. She thought that her father was pushing her, so she didn't care. After trying to walk forward for a short while, the little fellow began to get used to it. After Chin-shi took her around the ice car a few times, the nervous expression on the little fellow's face finally disappeared. It seemed to be very simple. She was so happy that she began to be carried away again, so she immediately shouted, "Papa, let go of me. I'll do it myself." Learning to skate required confidence. This was a good thing, so Chin-shi quickly let go of her hand. The little fellow silently felt for a moment. After finding that the feeling was still there, she began to skate forward by herself. At first, she walked very slowly, probably because she was afraid that she would fall. But under the guidance of Chin-shi's true essence, the little fellow found that no matter how she walked, she would not lose her center of gravity. So she took a step forward and directly ran on the ice. It was not right to say that she was running because she was using a standard posture. Her body was slightly bent, her center of gravity was shifted forward, and she kept stepping on the ice to move forward. In fact, she was now like learning to ride a children's bicycle. Because the rear wheel was equipped with 2 balance pulleys, no matter how fast she rode, the bicycle would not overturn. Oh, the 2 brothers who were watching by the side had such expressions on their faces. Looking at the little fellow who was flying on the ice, they were completely stunned. Was learning to skate really so easy? How long had their sister been learning? How could she run so fast? Thinking of this, the elder brother stood up from the ice car excitedly, ready to learn by himself. However, he was the same as the little fellow at the beginning. Just as he took a step forward, his whole body suddenly fell backward. If it wasn't for Chin-shi pulling him back in time, it was estimated that her brother would have fallen hard. Come, don't worry. Uncle will teach you. Little by little, Chin-shi held the elder brother in one hand and the younger brother in the other. According to what he had taught the little fellow just now, after they had learned to stand firm, Chin-shi led them slowly forward. After they had adapted, Chin-shi followed suit. He wrapped them with true essence and let them skate by themselves. In less than half an hour, the 3 little fellows who could not even stand firm at the beginning, were now able to run unscrupulously on the ice skating field. Of course their flying state was fake. They were just cheating. Chin-shi used true essence to correct their movements. After they formed muscle memory, the 3 little fellows really learned to skate. Chapter 189. Today the 3 little guys could be considered to be free. With the help of Chin-shi's buff, they circled the skating area again and again. The only thing they didn't do was show off a wave of figure skating. Children of 4 or 5 years old skating so well naturally attracted the attention of many people. So after they played for a while, many people in the skating area knew them. What's more, they even took out their mobile phones to take small videos of them. The incessant cheers from the onlookers made the 3 little fellows extremely proud. Many children saw that they were so good, and they all clamored to learn to skate. However, when their parents put on the skates for them, these children couldn't even stand steadily, and they would suddenly fall down if they weren't careful. Although it didn't hurt much because of the thick winter clothes, it was a big psychological blow to the children. Why can others run so fast but they can't even stand? Seeing others in such a sorry state, the 3 little guys were very proud, and their self-confidence was about to burst. Among the children in the world, they were the smartest. It was rare to see the 3 little guys so proud, so Chin-shi didn't expose them, but let their self-confidence inflate. However, there was an obvious drawback to this. That was, the 3 little guys were so immersed in playing that they didn't even want to eat lunch. Under Chin-shi's repeated shouts, they reluctantly skated over, and then returned to the tea house to prepare for lunch. With the opening of the Shikahai skating rink, the nearby shops would also welcome the peak season. The tea house's business was really good today. Many guests who were tired from playing in the ice rink would go to the tea house to sit and rest for a while. This was only the first day of the ice rink's opening, so although there were many people, it was far from the peak. In a few days, when it was winter 39th, the Shikahai skating rink would really usher in the peak of the flow of people. At that time, the tea house would probably be full all day. The so-called 3 years of not opening but opening to eat for 3 years, is probably the meaning of this. After lunch, the 3 little guys clamored to go out to play again. They were so energetic that they didn't seem like 4 or 5 years old children. Chin-shi wanted them to take a rest, take a nap in the tea house and go out to play in the afternoon. But the 3 little guys didn't agree at all. The little fellow even ran behind Chin-shi and pushed him from behind, trying to push him out of the tea house. The 2 brothers each held one of his hands and insisted that Chin-shi take them to the ice rink to play. Since she was already acting like a spoiled child, Chin-shi had no choice but to agree. Just as they were about to head to the ice rink again, an old acquaintance entered the tea house. It was still Qiao Yuan. But today she came alone. She was also dragging a suitcase. It looked like she had brought all her belongings with her. The northern schools started their winter break earlier than the southern schools, so Qiao Yuan's school had already started their winter break at the beginning of January. Instead of going home, she wanted to work part-time in the tea house. Well, as long as you provide food and shelter, you don't need to be paid. Chin-shi's family didn't seem to be short of money, so Qiao Yuan wanted to thank Chin-shi in this way. In this regard, Father Qiao didn't have any objections. He just told her not to fall behind on her homework and the rest was up to her. Chin-shi saw her determined look as if she wouldn't leave if he didn't agree, so he had no choice but to agree. Anyway, there was still more than a month before the new year, so he let her stay here for a month. The business of the tea house was estimated to improve a lot during this time, so having an extra person would save him a lot of trouble. As for the salary, he would pay it when the time came. But then again, the work of the tea house was really easy. She only needed to serve tea to the guests, and after the guests left, she would simply clean up. She didn't need Qin Shi to teach her. Qiao Yuan sat down at the bar and directly started. Seeing that Qin Shi suddenly hired a waiter, Old Gu was happy to be free, so he sat in the lobby and watched TV. The three little guys waited obediently by the side. After Qin Shi finished explaining to Qiao Yuan, they swarmed up again and tried to drag Qin Shi out of the door. Qin Shi was a little uncomfortable to suddenly become the leader of the children. After laughing and patting their heads, he opened the door of the tea house with the naughty little guys. However, just as Qin Shi walked out of the tea house, he bumped into two men in suits. Hohai was a residential area, not a central business district. Therefore, it was rare to see pedestrians dressed in business here. As soon as he saw these two men, the smile on Qin Shi's face disappeared and turned into a cold face. Because these two men were not ordinary people, but at least masters who had reached the level of covert power. Obviously they were here for him. Sure enough, Qin Shi just walked out of the tea house with the three little guys, and the two men directly came to him. "Mr. Qin, hello." One of them smiled and greeted Qin Shi, then handed out a business card and wanted to introduce himself. But at this time, Qin Shi didn't even give him a chance to speak. After coldly glancing at the two men, Qin Shi took the three little guys directly to the skating rink. The man in the suit was inexplicably met with a soft rebuff. Seeing Qin Shi swagger away with the children, they whispered to each other. It was impossible to chase after them. Since the other party put on such a posture, it was obvious that he didn't want to have too much contact with them. So after the two men discussed for a while, they turned around and walked into the tea house. They had to at least find an opportunity to explain to the other party why they were here. But in fact, Qin Shi had already guessed their intentions. After all, how sharp was his eyesight? Although he didn't take the business card with a casual glance, Qin Shi still saw the name of the company on the business card, Concord Corporation, and a series of Japanese words that he didn't recognize. Concord Corporation was the name of Japan, which was actually a company limited by shares of Huaxia. Japanese? Their Mandarin was indeed very standard, so just by looking at their appearance, it was impossible to tell that they were Japanese. In addition, these two men were also martial arts masters, and had reached the level of covert power. To be honest, Qin Shi would rather chat with the aunties selling vegetables on the street for half an hour than talk to any martial arts masters for a minute. The former was for living, the latter was to destroy his life. Not to mention that the other party was Japanese. Before Qin Shi left the earth, the relationship between China and Japan was getting more and more tense because of the Diaoyu Island incident. A few years had passed, probably because the relationship between China and Japan had improved significantly, so some people who didn't learn from their mistakes had emerged again. Speaking of which, where did the Wu Lian people go? The Japanese were already in front of him, but the Wu Lian didn't send anyone to stop them. Chapter 190. Qin Shi didn't take the two Japanese seriously at all. They were merely at the peak of concealing power. They couldn't even beat the big cat. Naturally, they were nothing to worry about. In the afternoon, the three little guys were not so enthusiastic about ice skating. Children were a little bit fond of the new and tired of the old. Perhaps because they thought they had learned it, after playing for a while, they began to wander around and came to the ice hockey area. Ice hockey was a recently popular ice game in Shangjing. This game was born 300 years ago during the Qianlong period, flourished during the Republic of China period, and gradually disappeared in the 1980s and 1990s. A few years ago, after the successful bid of the Winter Olympics in Shangjing, this long-established ice sport with both competitive and recreational characteristics was promoted by the government and flourished in Shangjing again. The game of ice hockey was very similar to curling but more competitive. The field was a rectangle of 12 meters long and 2 meters wide. One end was red, the other was blue. The center of the field was a circular scoring area. The game was very simple. Each side had 5 balls. The red team started first. Like curling, they pushed their red ball to the center of the circular area and occupied the most central position. When it was the blue team's turn, except for the first ball that couldn't hit the red team's ball, the other 4 balls could hit the red team's ball. Because the friction on the ice was very small, the ice ball could slide far away if it was hit slightly. The core of the game was to hit the opponent's ball and let your own ball stay in the central scoring area. After the 5 balls were hit, the score was calculated according to the scoring area occupied. Whoever had the highest score would win. It's like playing marbles. Simple. I know how to play. After Shi briefly explained the game to the three little guys, they immediately jumped up in excitement. She was now a master of marbles, and the two brothers played with her more often than not. After listening to Shi's explanation, the little guys suddenly felt that this game was similar to marbles. They couldn't help but be eager to try. The ice hockey area was very large and many fields had been drawn on the ground. Shi took them to randomly choose a field, and the three little guys used rock paper scissors to decide who would play first. Rock paper scissors had never been the elder brother's strength, so he lost without any suspense. The little guy and the younger brother played first. She was on the red team, so she started first. How could a child know so much? So the little guy didn't even consider how much strength he should use. He kicked the red ball right in front of his younger brother, which made the two brothers laugh out loud. Shi shook his head as he watched. The little fellow pouted, looking unhappy. Seeing this, Shi squatted beside her. After reaching out and pinching her little face, she said to the little fellow, "Nyin Yin, this is ice. Ice is very slippery, so you have to be gentle and control your strength. Let the ball just slide to the middle." As he spoke, he gently pushed out a red ball as a demonstration. The red ball stopped at the center of the 5-point zone. The little girl was so shocked that she opened her mouth and clapped her hands excitedly. "Papa is so awesome. Papa is so awesome." It didn't matter if he wasn't powerful as long as his father was. She stood up, rubbed the little fellow's head, and let the two brothers try their strength. After they had adapted to how much strength they should use, the ice hockey game began again. The reason why this game could become popular overnight was mainly because it was easy to learn and could be played by men and women, old and young. The three little guys had experience playing marbles, so they learned it at once. Seeing that they were playing back and forth, she watched the game with a smile. There were too many entertainment projects in the Shikahai skating rink. After they were tired of ice hockey, she also took them to play ice bumper cars, ice motorcycles, and other projects. After they played one by one, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. At 5 o'clock, the sky was already dark, and the outdoor lights around the skating rink were turned on one after another. The Shikahai skating rink had a night show, and it would be open until 10 o'clock in the evening. The amusement park was right outside their home. For the children, what could be happier than this? The two brothers had already played overtime today. It was estimated that they were also afraid of being scolded by their grandpa, so when they heard Shi say that it was time to go back, they immediately stopped, and then took the initiative to take the little fellow, who was still unwilling to leave, out of the skating rink. When Shi returned to the tea house with the three little guys, there were still several tables in the tea house. Xiao Yuan also did her duty as a waiter. As soon as she saw Shi enter the door, she quickly ran over, handed him the business card and said, "Boss, two guests just left a business card for you saying that they want to talk to you. They hope you can call them back." "Okay, I see." Shi nodded. After taking the business card, he didn't even look at it and directly threw it into the trash can next to him. Seeing Xiao Yuan's surprised face, he didn't explain. Instead, he smiled and said, "Clean up. We should close." "What about the guests? Tell them we're closing." "Okay." Since the boss said so, Xiao Yuan had to apologize to the guests at each table. Although the guests were a little confused, they didn't react too violently. But looking at them frowning and leaving, it was estimated that they wouldn't come again in the future. It couldn't be helped. The boss was so capricious that he didn't do business. While Xiao Yuan was still busy cleaning up, Gu Lao took the two brothers to say goodbye to Shi. "Sister, goodbye. I'll come and play with you tomorrow." "Okay, goodbye." The little girl stood beside Shi and waved her little hand at the two brothers reluctantly. After the brothers also left under Gu Lao's lead, the tea house returned to calm. After simply cleaning up the tea house, Shi said to Xiao Yuan, "Let's go, we should go home." Hearing this, Xiao Yuan was a little surprised and asked, "Go home? What else? Do you still want to go back to school?" No, I can live in the tea house. Can people live in this place?" "Let's go, there are many empty rooms in the courtyard. You can live in one." Xiao Yuan was still hesitating. But at this time, the little fellow suddenly grinned and said, "Sister, stay in our house. Our house is very big. We can play hide and seek." Perhaps the little fellow's persuasion had worked. So after thinking about it, Xiao Yuan nodded heavily and said, "Then I'll bother you." "It's okay, let's go." The tea house was closed, but the Shikahai skating rink opposite was still very lively. The little fellow lay on Shi's shoulder and kept turning her head to look at the tourists inside. Looking at her little eyes, she probably wanted to go in and play for a while. Xiao Yuan pulled the suitcase and silently followed behind the father and daughter. Passing through Dongming Alley, just as she walked into the courtyard, she was shocked by the spacious courtyard in front of her. To have such a big courtyard in Shangjing, the boss's family was really rich. She didn't know what Qiao Yuan was thinking. He just stepped into the front yard with Qiao Yuan, and the door of the east wing was pushed open. Then, Qin Xueqing came out of the room. Chapter 191. When Qiao Yuan saw Qin Xueqing walk out from the east wing, she was shocked by her beauty. Qiao Yuan knew Qin Ruoying, but she had never seen Qin Xueqing before. The two sisters didn't look alike. The only thing they had in common was probably their beauty. If they were to be compared to flowers, then Qin Ruoying was obviously a noble and elegant peony, while Qin Xueqing was a snow lotus blooming on the peak of Tianshan Mountain. The former was approachable while the latter was unapproachable. Compared to them, Qiao Yuan was like the most common wild chrysanthemum by the roadside. Her sister-in-law's aura was too strong, like a sword that was about to be unsheathed at any time. That scared the little girl. Even though Shi didn't turn around, he could feel the uneasiness coming from Qiao Yuan. Therefore, after a simple greeting to Qin Xueqing, Shi brought Qiao Yuan directly to the west wing. There were 3 rooms in each wing, but the middle one was slightly bigger than the other 2. You can stay here. There's a bathroom in the room, hot water, heating and so on. But you have to bring your own toiletries. I already brought them. Okay, then you can pack up first. I'll call you when it's time to eat later. Okay. Thank you, boss. After explaining to Qiao Yuan, Shi carried the little girl out of her room. At this time, Qin Ruoying heard the commotion outside, so she walked out of the west wing. The moment she walked out, she saw Qin Xueqing opposite her. Qin Xueqing was wearing a windbreaker today, which covered both her arms. However, the empty sleeve on the right seemed to be telling him something. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying couldn't help but have a complicated expression on her face. She knew her sister's character very well, so she didn't say anything to comfort her. Instead, she smiled naturally and said, "Yueqing, you're back?" A seemingly normal greeting made Qin Xueqing's expression melt like an iceberg, and she smiled for the first time. "Yes, I just came back." When Shi carried the little girl out of the room, the sisters were greeting each other. The little girl turned her head and saw Qin Ruoying. Seeing her mother next to her, the little girl couldn't help but shout excitedly, "Mama! Mama!" Seeing this, Shi quickly put her down. Then the little girl called for her mother while running toward Qin Ruoying. Hearing the little girl's cry, Qin Ruoying hurriedly crouched down and hugged her in her arms. "Hey Nyin, did you have fun today?" "Yes." "Mama, do you want to go ice skating with us? It's so fun." "No, Mommy still has to study. Otherwise, Daddy will get angry." Hearing this, the little girl couldn't help but pout. As looking back at Shi, she whispered, "Papa is so stingy." After hearing this silly child's complaint, the couple couldn't help but smile at each other. Then they couldn't help but laugh. The sister-in-law stood on the steps outside the east wing, silently watching the family of 3 show off their love. She didn't come here to stand in the cold wind and pose. Looking at this posture, she probably had something to say to Shi. Therefore, after letting the little girl wave to Qin Xueqing, Qin Ruoying carried the little girl back to the room, and Shi came to Qin Xueqing. Since she was his sister-in-law, Shi didn't need to beat around the bush with her, so he asked directly, "Why did you suddenly come back? Is it because of the 2 islanders who came to find me today?" "Yes, they are from Yinyang Liao." "Oh, ninjas?" "No, they are Yinyang Masters." "Yinyang Masters? What's that?" "You don't know? Why should I know?" Shi replied matter-of-factly, which made Qin Xueqing look at him in surprise. After all, in Qin Xueqing's opinion, Shi was an alchemist with a high cultivation base. In terms of strength, he was probably stronger than Su Fu, so there was no reason for him not to know the origin of the Yinyang Masters. The so-called Yinyang Masters were actually a variant of the alchemist lineage. Legend had it that after Su Fu left with 3,000 boys and girls, because he couldn't find the immortal medicine and was afraid of being punished by Qin Shi Huang, he simply fled to Japan to reproduce and become the divine emperor of Japan. It was hard to say whether Su Fu was the divine emperor of Japan or not. However, what was certain was that Su Fu must have gone to Japan back then and brought technology and culture to the Japanese, allowing the Japanese civilization to advance by leaps and bounds. In an instant they had stepped into the Bronze Age from the Stone Age. Therefore, even until now, many places in Japan still had legends about Su Fu. There was even a Su Fu Park in Shingon City. As for the other shrines, tombs, and stone tablets that worshipped Su Fu, they were even more common. As the strongest alchemist of the Qin dynasty, After Su Fu's death, his legacy was naturally passed down in Japan. This was the origin of the Yin-Yang Masters. After Qin Shueqing briefly explained the origin of the Yin-Yang Masters, Qin Shi nodded thoughtfully and then asked, "What is Yin-Yang Liao?" Yin-Yang Liao is backed by the government. You can think of it as the Wu Lian of Japan. I see. He nodded and immediately had an answer in his heart. Qin Shueqing looked at Qin Shi's expression and couldn't help but frown. She hesitated for a moment and then suddenly asked, "Did you notice something? Can you tell me?" Her sister-in-law was very humble. It seemed that she was sincerely asking for advice. However, when Qin Shi heard her words, she didn't seem to understand. She opened her mouth and asked, Tell you what? Don't tell me you don't know about the phenomena during this period. I keep feeling that something big is going to happen. You're thinking too much. I don't have the ability to read fortunes." Qin Shi smiled and casually gave an excuse. Qin Wanqing would only be able to sense the spirit qi of heaven and earth when she reached at least the latter stage of qi refinement, which was the aperture opening state. The spirit qi revival wasn't the end of the world. It wouldn't be like the outbreak of the biochemical virus that caused monsters to run rampant. For mortals, the spirit qi revival only made their body condition better. The ones who were truly affected were martial artists and necromancers. Especially the latter. Qin Shi hadn't come into contact with the inheritance of necromancers, but from Qin Shueqing's description, the direction of necromancers' cultivation should be somewhat similar to that of immortal cultivators. It was probably because the spirit qi on earth was too sparse, so the celestial being was the limit of necromancers. The so-called cultivation was actually more like evolution. The environment would limit the evolution of creatures. For example, the temperature during the Cretaceous period was 9 to 12 degrees higher than now, and the oxygen content of the atmosphere was several times higher than now. These conditions were conducive to the growth of creatures, which was why prehistoric creatures could grow so huge. Even insects at that time grew bigger than humans. Why didn't Qin Shi seize the time to cultivate? It was because in the current situation on Earth, the celestial being was the limit. He could slowly recover his strength through accumulation, but if he wanted to go further, it was almost impossible. Unless... Chapter 192. Earth became the heavenly jade realm. It sounded simple, but in reality? No matter how fast the recovery of spirit qi was, it was obviously impossible to turn a planet in the age of chaos into a holy land for cultivation in an instant. This was a process that had been accumulating over time. As for how much time this process would take, no one could say for sure. Some time ago, Qin Shi made such a big commotion in Meimen that many people knew of his existence. A celestial who did not belong to any organization and suddenly appeared out of nowhere naturally attracted the interest of all forces. Therefore, Yin-Yang Liao of Japan tried to contact Qin Shi and tried to extend an olive branch to him. Those two Japanese were Japanese businessmen who were doing legitimate business in Shangjing, so Wu Lian could not take any coercive measures against them. Wu Lian naturally would not sit back and do nothing. Therefore, he hurriedly called Qin Shueqing back, wanting to observe Qin Shi's attitude through her. After all, at the level of a celestial, the concept of a country was already very vague. For example, when great-granduncle stepped into the celestial realm, Huaxia had not yet been established. Such an old antique naturally would not have any deep feelings for this country. On this point, Wu Lian misunderstood Qin Shi. Qin Shi had received 9 years of compulsory education and 4 years of undergraduate study in university. He was an outstanding young man of the new era. When he was in university, he was a real patriotic young man. Qin Shi had always believed that one should not forget one's ancestors, so even if he went to Heavenly Jade for 500 years after coming back, he did not do anything illegal. Well, Zhao Yuan's matter did not count. Qin Shueqing was very dissatisfied with Qin Shi's perfunctory response. She frowned slightly, looked deeply at Qin Shi and then said coldly, "If you don't want to say it, then forget it." After that, Qin Shueqing turned and went back to the east wing. It seemed that sister-in-law was angry? Qin Shi shook his head helplessly, then turned and walked to the kitchen. He still had to make dinner for the little fellow. It was not that Qin Shi was deliberately keeping her in suspense. It was just that with Qin Shueqing's current cultivation level, she really could not understand the recovery of spiritual energy. If he wanted her to understand, Qin Shi would have to explain the existence of cultivators to her in detail. Instead of going through so much trouble, he might as well let his sister-in-law cultivate on her own. In any case, she would be able to step into the foundation establishment stage very soon. When that time came, she would naturally be able to clearly sense the changes in this world, as well as the effects of spirit qi on cultivators. Why is Enyang Liao from Japan looking for Qin Shi? It was all because he had exposed his strength in Meimin, allowing many major powers to discover the existence of a celestial. The so-called celestial being was probably between Foundation Establishment and Gold Core. Because he had not condensed his golden core, he had only just broken through the Foundation Establishment stage and touched the threshold of the Golden Core stage. Regardless of whether he was a martial artist or a necromancer, as long as he reached this stage, he must have accumulated enough vital essence and opened up all the apertures in his body. At this stage he already had a certain understanding of the heavenly Tao, so he only needed to take one more step forward to condense the three flowers, refine his golden core and truly step into the Golden Core stage. Although the celestial being was powerful, for them the earth was a boundless desert. They stood at the highest point in the world only to find that they were lost in the desert. They could not find the direction and did not know where they should go. The recovery of spiritual energy was like an oasis that suddenly appeared in the desert, guiding them in the direction to continue moving forward. Forward again. The Pure Land was in front of them. Large-scale organizations with national backgrounds like Wu Lian and Enyang Liao must have celestial being in charge. In the past, the celestial being could not find the way and could only wait for death silently. Now that there was a way, the little mind that had been dead for a long time naturally became active again. Strengthen your own strength and prepare for the coming great era. This was the awareness that every large organization should have. Therefore, a wild crane like Qin Shi became a delicious cake in the eyes of various forces. During dinner, Qin Shi called a few times, but his sister-in-law did not come out. She was probably angry. Therefore, Qin Shi no longer cared about her. Anyway, she would naturally know to go to the kitchen to find food when she was hungry. There were guests today, so the little fellow was very enthusiastic. After seeing Qiao Yuan enter the room, she went to Qiao Yuan's side and kept talking to her. Qin Ruoying asked her to sit down and wait for dinner. But at this time, the little fellow jumped down from the chair like a wisp of smoke. Then she eagerly ran to get a bowl of rice for Qiao Yuan. After handing the bowl to Qiao Yuan, the little fellow laughed and said, "Sister, eat. Papa's cooking is delicious." She usually lived a life of stretching out her hands and opening her mouth, but today she took the initiative to take care of the guests. Her performance was really good. Therefore, Qin Ruoying rubbed the little fellow's head and praised her generously. "Nian is so obedient and sensible." After hearing her mother's praise, the little fellow was obviously a little embarrassed. She sat in the chair and fidgeted a few times. Then, as if to hide her shyness, she suddenly clapped her hands and shouted, "I'm hungry. I want to eat." Okay. You eat first." Qin Shi brought the last dish. As soon as he entered the door, he heard the little fellow's muttering, so he rubbed her head and put the plate in front of her. This was the little fellow's favorite golden lion head. Each of them was as big as a steamed bun. When placed on the plate, they constantly emitted a fragrance. She did not hesitate. After picking up the spoon and forking a piece, she directly opened her mouth and took a bite. The mellow meat and juice poured into her mouth, and the little fellow was so happy that she kept nodding her head. "Papa, delicious, delicious." After swallowing the food in her mouth, the little fellow patted Qiao Yuan and said excitedly, "Sister, try it. My papa made the lion head. It's delicious." Seeing that Qiao Yuan was still a little reserved, Qin Ruoying said to her with a smile, "His cooking is really good. Do you want to try it?" Hearing this, Qiao Yuan picked up the chopsticks and said embarrassedly, "Okay." She picked up a piece of lion head and took a small bite. She did not eat as much as the little fellow. But after eating, Qiao Yuan's eyes lit up and she said in surprise, "It's delicious. Boss, your cooking is so good. If you open a restaurant with this skill, I guess you'll have to wait for at least 3 hours outside. Eat more if it's delicious. Don't be shy." "Well, thank you, boss." The boss's family were all good people. After a short time together, Qiao Yuan completely relaxed. After dinner, she took the initiative to play with the Barbie doll with the little fellow. She was originally a student of Beijing Normal University. If nothing unexpected happened, she should become a glorious teacher after graduation. Looking at the lively and cute little fellow in front of her, Qiao Yuan suddenly had an idea in her mind. Maybe she could consider being the tutor of the little fellow? Chapter 193. Night fell. The street lamps outside the alley constantly emitted a gentle light, as if bringing some warmth to this cold snowy night. Perhaps it was because of the cold weather. The streets were very quiet at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was so quiet that it didn't seem like Shangjing City. A Toyota Alpha slowly drove down from the North Second Ring Road overpass and headed straight for Dishing Men Inner Street. After the car passed Dishing Bridge, it stopped in front of Dongming Alley. Then a man in a suit got out of the car. If Chen Shi were here now, he would recognize that this man was the Japanese who handed him a business card in the afternoon. The man in the suit got out of the car first and then stood respectfully to the side. Then another person got out of the car. This was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s. He was not tall, only about 1.7 meters. His appearance was very ordinary, but the way he dressed was very strange. On such a cold day, this middle-aged man was only wearing a kimono and a pair of wooden clogs. This attire was very much in line with the customs of the island nation. Standing on the streets of the old Shangjing, it was particularly eye-catching. Fortunately, it was late at night and there were no pedestrians on the road. Otherwise, with the way he was dressed, this middle-aged man would definitely be photographed and surrounded. If he was unlucky enough to meet a few angry youths, he might even receive a large pile of leather shoes, eggs, banana peels. Abe ashi 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 ashi. Bye li 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 li. Oh. Okay. Oh. The man in the suit bowed and said a few words to the man in the kimono. After a few simple words, the man in the kimono nodded and walked into Dongming Alley. The man in the suit hummed a few times. When he looked up, he realized that the man in the kimono had already walked into the alley, so he hurriedly followed him. Perhaps it was because the man in the kimono held a high position in his heart, so the man in the suit deliberately bowed when he walked. He looked like a little eunuch who served the emperor in ancient times. He always had a respectful look on his face. Dongming Alley was not very deep. After walking for a while, the two of them arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. The man in the kimono didn't need the man in the suit to remind him. He glanced at the bright gate next to him and stopped at the entrance of the courtyard. The man in the suit was a little confused. Just as he was about to say something, the man in the kimono suddenly raised his right hand and signaled for him to be silent. Choo choo choo. Ho. The man in the suit replied softly, hi. Then he obediently retreated to the side. The man in the kimono stopped in front of the door. The kimono man closed his eyes and silently sensed for a moment. His expression turned cold and he could not help but take a step forward. At the same time, a low meow of a cat suddenly sounded above the kimono man's head. Meow. The man in the kimono looked up and realized that a black cat had appeared on the roof. The black cat stood at the edge of the roof, its eyes glowing green as it stared at the man in the kimono in the alley. For a black cat to appear in the middle of the night, a normal person would be scared out of their wits. However, the man in the kimono was not surprised at all. Instead, he looked at the black cat with interest and said, hello? It wasn't that the big cat couldn't understand human language, but there were many different kinds of human language. It really couldn't understand a single word of this kind of gibberish. Therefore, the big cat couldn't understand what the man in front of it was talking about. Chen Shi warned it not to change back to its original form and not to attack people easily. Therefore, when the big cat sensed a faint chi fluctuation on the man's body, it only issued a warning. Then it laid on the roof and put on a defensive posture. The courtyard was its territory. As long as the man didn't step in, the big cat naturally wouldn't care about him. The big cat issued a warning, but the man in the kimono didn't seem to understand. Instead, he smiled and waved at the big cat. Then he stepped on the steps outside the gate. Meow. Seeing this, the big cat suddenly felt as if someone had stepped on its tail. All the hair on its body stood on end, and its figure suddenly jumped down. The speed was extremely fast. It jumped down from the sky and almost instantly pounced in front of the man in the kimono. The claws of felines could be retracted. When they weren't hunting, they would retract their claws into their fleshy palms. This was because it effectively prevented the claws from being worn out and at the same time, prevented them from hurting their own kind. The big cat looked fierce, but in fact it didn't extend its claws. This was because it was only trying to intimidate the other party and scare him away. However, although it was intelligent compared to humans, it was still a little too simple. When he saw the big cat jump down from the roof and pounce on him, the man in the kimono didn't panic at all. Instead, a faint smile appeared on his face. The big cat just wanted to scare him away, but the man in the kimono directly attacked. While the big cat was still in midair, the man in the kimono suddenly raised his right arm. From bottom to top, he directly hit the big cat's belly with his palm. Bam! This palm had been brewing for a long time. When it hit the big cat's body, it even made a muffled sound. Immediately after, the big cat's thin and small body was directly sent flying. After flying a few meters, the big cat fell heavily to the ground. Fortunately, it was a monster. Its skin was rough and its flesh was thick. In addition, it had cultivated the great wilderness physical training technique that Qinshi had given it. Therefore, after taking a hit, the big cat was actually fine. It shook its body and stood up again. Meow. Even a human would be enraged after being hit by such a palm for no reason, let alone a wild beast like him. After being attacked, the big cat didn't hesitate at all. After getting up from the ground, its body rapidly expanded, and in an instant, it changed back to its original form. The big cat's body didn't become bigger to scare people, but to increase its combat power. Monsters could only rely on themselves. Therefore, in theory, the bigger their body, the stronger their combat power. Seeing the black cat in front of him turn into a black panther whose body was comparable to a fierce tiger's, the man in the kimono wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Yori Yori." Just as he was putting on the airs of an expert, the big cat had already turned into a black shadow and pounced towards him again. This time the big cat really treated him as prey. Although the man in the kimono had succeeded in his attack, when he saw the big cat pouncing on him again, he didn't let his guard down. Instead, he suddenly put his palms together in front of his chest and instantly formed several hand seals. Yori Yori Yori. Yori Yori Yori, if translated in Huaxia, it would be Chapter 194. In the alley. Because it was too far from the roadside, the street lights couldn't reach it, so it could only be vaguely seen by the moonlight. Big Cat's figure was hidden in the darkness. Its two glowing green eyes were like will-o'-the-wisps floating around. It was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of the man in the kimono. Just as Big Cat jumped up and waved its claws at the man in the kimono, he suddenly put his hands together and quickly chanted, "Ashi Ashi me." At this moment, the big cat's animal instincts made it feel a sense of danger. It was a cold feeling. Although the temperature tonight was around -5 or 6 degrees Celsius, the sudden cold feeling faintly revealed a bone-chilling coldness. Big Cat's body stiffened, and then it subconsciously pulled back its fur. At the same time, Big Cat also jumped in front of the man in the kimono. But just as it waved its claws and was about to crush the man's head, a blade reflecting the cold moonlight suddenly appeared in Big Cat's sight. It was a katana. From top to bottom, it was directly aimed at Big Cat's head. Meow. Big Cat, whose voice had always been low and hoarse, let out a sharp and ear-piercing cry at this moment. At this critical moment, it suddenly stretched its claws to the top of its head, and used its sharp claws to block the katana that was coming down fiercely. Ding! The sharp claws blocked the katana, and in an instant, there was a sound of metal colliding with stone. The katana cut the big cat's claws, but it didn't stop and continued to cut downwards. The blade violently rubbed against the sharp claws, and in an instant, a series of sparks were drawn. In an instant, the alley was like a firework, and the splashing sparks also reflected the face of the katana's owner. It was a samurai wearing Japanese-style armor and a yakuza mask. The armored samurai was at least 2 meters tall, and the man in the kimono standing behind him looked like a child. Big Cat was confused by the sudden appearance of this armored warrior. After blocking the attack, it leaped back and crouched on the ground, ready to pounce at any time. The sudden appearance of this armored warrior made the big cat feel threatened. It didn't pounce on the warrior right away. Instead, it meowed at the warrior. The big cat was originally a monster in the Awakening Wisdom realm. After following Qinshi for a period of time, it ate the energy pills every day as snacks, so its cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Now, it had even stepped into the late stage of the Awakening Wisdom realm. According to the current progress, it was estimated that it would be ready to condense a Yao core soon. Even so, the sudden appearance of the armored warrior still made the big cat feel threatened. Because the other party could injure it. He didn't know what material the katana was made of, but it was extremely hard and sharp. The big cat blocked the attack with its paw, but a shallow scratch was left on its paw. This made the big cat secretly vigilant. Monsters weren't immortal cultivators, so they didn't know so many fancy spells and moves. Fangs and claws were their only means of attack, but this didn't mean that monsters couldn't beat immortal cultivators of the same realm. In fact, in the case of the same realm, when monsters fought against immortal cultivators, it was usually the monsters who won by crushing them. Although they didn't have many means, every one of them was fatal. It could be said that they were simple, crude, and aimed at the vital points. Monsters didn't have as many tricks as humans. Nature's survival of the fittest had long taught them one truth: a lion would use all its strength even when hunting a rabbit. The big cat lay on the ground and observed for a while. Seeing that the armored warrior was still standing in place with the katana in his hand and hadn't made any movements, it leaped out again. But this time it didn't rush straight over. Instead, it jumped to the side of the wall. Immediately after, the big cat was like a dragonfly skimming the water. It went along the wall, past the armored warrior, and went directly behind the man in the kimono. The big cat wasn't stupid. This armored warrior didn't look easy to deal with, so it was prepared to kill the man in the kimono first, then slowly deal with the armored warrior. It had been preparing for this attack for a long time. After the sudden explosion, the big cat's speed was even faster than before. The armored warrior was still standing in front of the man in the kimono in a daze, but the big cat had already pounced on the man from behind. Like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, the big cat's strong body instantly pounced in front of the man in the kimono. A trace of surprise flashed in the man's eyes, as if he didn't expect this monster to know to attack him directly. However, even though he was surprised, the kimono man did not panic at all. As soon as the 9 words mantra came out, the eyes of the armored warrior, who had been standing there in a daze, suddenly flashed red. Then he seemed to have come back to life. The armored samurai was very strange. It was as if he could teleport. He appeared in front of the kimono man and blocked the big cat's attack. The katana came down on the big cat's head again, but this time the big cat was prepared. Meow! It let out a sharp roar. Then the big cat did not care about the katana in the armored samurai's hand at all and pounced directly on the armored samurai. The katana slashed on the big cat's body, but it was as if it had hit an iron plate. In an instant there was a loud sound of metal colliding. Ding! Under the violent impact, the big cat's body could not help but tremble. However, it still did not stop. Instead, it pounced directly on the armored samurai. This was a common hunting method for big cats. They pounced on their prey at an extremely fast speed. After knocking the other party down, they used their mouths to attack the prey's trachea or cervical vertebra to achieve the effect of a one-hit kill. However, an unexpected scene occurred. How powerful was the big cat's full pounce? However, this 2-meter-tall armored samurai resisted it. He stood in place like Mount Tai, majestic and unmoving. Seeing that it did not pounce on the other party, the big cat put its claws on the armored samurai's shoulders, then opened its mouth and bit directly at the other party's neck. Sharp teeth and claws. For monsters, teeth were sharper weapons than claws. Their sharp teeth, coupled with their huge bite force, were enough to tear all creatures into mud. The big cat bit down, followed by a series of tearing, as if it wanted to break the armored samurai's neck. However, how could the armored samurai just sit there and wait for death? Therefore, he held the katana in his right hand, clenched his left hand into a fist, and punched directly at the big cat's head. Bang! Bang! The fist hit the big cat's head, making a muffled sound. However, the big cat gritted its teeth and did not let go. Finally, with a soft tearing sound, the armored samurai's head was torn off by the big cat. Seeing that its attack had succeeded, the big cat jumped off the armored samurai's body with the head in its mouth. However, the strange thing was, the armored samurai's head was gone, but he still stood straight in place. The big cat loosened its teeth and threw the head on the ground. His head rolled a few times on the ground before coming to a stop. However, at this moment the big cat realized, this was not a head, it was just an empty helmet. As soon as he finished speaking, the piece of paper that was still intact a moment ago instantly turned into countless fine white ashes and disappeared from his hand as if it had been burned by fire. Meow! Suddenly, the big cat let out a slightly panicked scream, because it found that its body had strangely stopped in mid-air. As if someone had pressed the pause button, the scene instantly froze. The big cat maintained its pouncing posture and stopped in mid-air, unable to move at all. This was the method of a yin-yang master. In addition to summoning spirit-branded retainers, they also knew yin-yang techniques. This was the foundation of yin-yang masters in the world. Spirit of Speech, Bind was one of the spells commonly used by yin-yang masters. This spell was somewhat similar to the one Qin-Shi used to play with his sister-in-law. However, the man in the kimono used a proper yin-yang technique, while Qin-Shi used force to break through the technique. Directly using his true essence as a tentacle, spirit of speech, bind had a long and short duration, and it would constantly change according to the cultivation of the caster and the target. After all, the big cat was an intelligent monster, so it was bound for less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds seemed very short, but in fact, it was enough for a lot of things to happen. For example, the armored samurai was already rushing over with his katana. Just as the big cat broke free from its bindings and continued to pounce on the man in the kimono, the katana glinted coldly and directly cut the big cat in the middle. Cut in half. If it was a normal wild beast, it would naturally be cut in half by this attack. However, the big cat was a monster. When it was in battle mode, its fur would stiffen and harden, turning into something comparable to armor to protect itself. Thus, when the katana cut the big cat, it immediately created a series of sparks on its fur. The katana's blade was extremely sharp, and this cut was a solid one, so the big cat immediately cried out in pain. Meow. It was injured. After being hit by this attack, the big cat's body suddenly felt as if it had been hit by a heavy hammer, and it fell heavily to the ground with a dull thud. The big cat fell to the ground, but it didn't hesitate at all. It got up and ran, jumping back to the roof in an instant. It really suffered a big loss this time. After seeing the big cat jump back to the roof, the man in the kimono had a surprised expression on his face. He originally thought that this monster would be seriously injured even if it didn't die, but he didn't expect that this attack would only hurt its fur. The monster in front of him didn't have much attack power, but its defense was really beyond his imagination. After a short confrontation, the alley temporarily returned to peace. The big cat lay on the roof and its glowing green eyes stared at the man in the kimono below. After the man in the kimono sized up the big cat on the roof, the expression on his face became a little serious. He didn't see the owner of this place come out after such a fierce fight, so he guessed that the other party wanted to test his strength through this monster. He didn't come here to play with this beast. If he couldn't even take care of a pet guarding the door, then he might as well go home now. Thinking of this, the man in the kimono couldn't help but look down at the katana in the armored warrior's hand. When he saw the bloodstains on it, the man in the kimono nodded in satisfaction. Then he took out 3 talismans from his arms. Don't let others look down on you. The big cat had already suffered a loss from the talismans, so when it saw the man in the kimono take out 3 yellow talismans, it immediately let out a low growl. Meow. The big cat grimaced. An injured beast was the most terrifying. This man in the kimono had completely angered it. However, when the big cat let out a low growl, it suddenly sensed something and quickly turned its head to look to the side. A figure appeared beside it at some point. The big cat was stunned, but the person directly rubbed its head with his hand. The big cat, who came back to its senses, didn't attack him. Instead, it seemed to be enjoying it and couldn't help but slightly squint its eyes. You did well today, this is your reward. The person lightly patted the big cat's head, and then stuffed a few pills into its mouth. The big cat swallowed the pills and then rubbed its body against the person's leg. The ink leopard, whose body was comparable to a fierce tiger, was nestled under the person's leg at this moment, and constantly let out a pet cat's meowing sound. It looked really strange, in the alley. The man in the kimono looked up at the scene in front of him, and couldn't help but frown. He really didn't understand. Chapter 196. In the quiet alley under the dark night sky. The young man who suddenly appeared on the roof immediately attracted all the attention of the man in the kimono. When did he get here? Where did he come from? How did he appear on the roof in the blink of an eye? The man in the kimono looked very calm on the surface, but there were waves in his heart. At this time, the man in the suit also saw the young man who suddenly appeared on the roof, so he immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the man in the kimono. Then he said in an extremely low voice, "Mr. Abe, he is Mr. Chin? Mr. Abe, he is Mr. Chin? I had already guessed it." Yo. Yes. After the two of them had a simple conversation, the man in the kimono signaled the man in the suit to leave. Then he took a step forward and said to the young man on the roof in a deep voice, "Enyang Liao's Vice Minister Enyang Quanju Shintaro Abe here, greets your excellency." After saying that, the man in the kimono patted his chest heavily with his right hand, and then made a chest-patting salute to Chenshi on the roof. The man in the kimono's Mandarin was not standard, and it was somewhat like the Japanese accent that was commonly seen in TV dramas. Because of the long-term influence of the Bushido spirit, Japanese practitioners often regarded honor as more important than life, so they could not accept any mistakes, and once they made a mistake, it was very likely that they would choose to commit suicide by committing suicide. This kind of slightly morbid national culture also made them particularly worship the strong. As long as the other party was stronger than them, they would be able to obtain supreme respect. But if the other party was weaker than them, then Yinyang Liao was an official organization, mainly composed of 4 officers, technical officers and instructors, and had various diplomatic departments and direct subordinates under them. If Yinyang Liao was compared to a county, then Vice Minister Yinyang Quanzhu could be considered as the vice mayor of this county. A county usually has 1 mayor, 5 to 10 vice mayors or more. Yinyang Quanzhu was considered one of the top figures in Yinyang Liao. Since such a figure appeared in Huaxia's capital, he would naturally be monitored by the Wu Lian. This was a matter of great importance, so Shintaro Abe decided to pay them a personal visit. However, because the Wu Lian inspection office was following him closely, Shintaro Abe could only choose such a bad time to visit. She stood on the roof and gently stroked Big Cat's head. At the same time, he used his true essence to stop the wound on Big Cat's back. After hearing Shintaro Abe's words, She did not immediately reply. Instead, he silently looked at the 2 Japanese below. The man in the suit had given him a business card before, but this was the first time the man in the kimono had seen it. He did not immediately reply, but silently looked at Shintaro Abe as if thinking about something. After a long while, She suddenly raised his right hand, formed a sword with his fingers, and pointed directly at the armored warrior beside him. A ray of golden inner yuan suddenly exploded from his fingertips. Like a laser beam, it instantly hit the armored warrior's chest. The unforeseen event happened so suddenly that Shintaro Abe could not react at all. When he turned to look at the armored warrior, his chest suddenly heated up, and a bloody taste surged up his throat. Then he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Everlasting evil, vanquish evil. One of the 49 styles of heaven's divination, specialized in destroying all filth and evil in the world, souls and spirits. Wherever the inner yuan touched, evil spirits would be destroyed. Therefore, when the armored warrior was hit by vanquish evil, he instantly turned into white smoke and disappeared from the alley. The so-called spirit-branded retainer was actually refined with Yin spirits, and it required the caster's own blood essence to cultivate the spirit-branded retainer, and had absolute control over the spirit-branded retainer. The existence of the spirit-branded retainer was closely related to the Yin-Yang master, and if the spirit-branded retainer was severely injured, the Yin-Yang master would also be injured. Shi's current cultivation was not the same as when he was in Zhonghai, and a casual finger was enough to defeat the spirit-branded retainer that Shintaro Abe had painstakingly cultivated for many years. I will spare your life today, but don't let me see you again and anything related to Yinyang Liao. Do you understand? Although Shi was no longer the 8th grader who would only hate Japan for no reason, he still did not have a good impression of Japan. He was too lazy to feign civility with Shintaro Abe in front of him, and directly expressed his attitude. Although Shintaro Abe was severely injured, his expression did not change much. After hearing Shi's words, Shintaro Abe acted as if nothing had happened, and hurriedly bowed and said, "Ho! I will remember. Those who belong to Yinyang Liao will never disturb you again. Please accept our friendship. Alright, cut the crap, you guys can leave. Ho!" After saying that, Shi was too lazy to bother with them, and turned around to return to the courtyard with the big cat. After Shi left, Shintaro Abe could not stand still. His legs went soft and he almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, the man in the suit next to him caught him in time. Shi suddenly turned hostile and injured Shintaro Abe, which made the man in the suit very angry. As he helped Shintaro Abe out of the alley, he whispered a few words into Shintaro Abe's ear. But what the man in the suit didn't expect was that after Shintaro Abe heard this, he slapped him in the face and scolded him. "Baka. Idiot. I'm sorry I'm wrong." What kind of existence was a celestial being? Shintaro Abe thought that the man in the suit was actually thinking of revenge. This kind of thinking was really stupid. Because his motto was, "There were no eternal enemies or eternal friends in this world. There were only eternal interests." Although the visit ended in failure, Shintaro Abe didn't think it was too bad. After all, the great era was coming. An individual's strength would always be powerless in the face of a huge organization. Chapter 197. HTTP status 500-160 / or type exception report / or message 160 / or description the server encounter at an internal error that prevented from fulfilling this request / or exception 8 y 2 / or note the full stack Apache. She then reluctantly said goodbye to Auntie Zhang. Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying were hanging red lanterns in the courtyard. As soon as the red lanterns were hung up, the courtyard immediately felt a bit more festive. When Chen Shi was about to paste the word "Fu" on the door and window, the little fellow finally couldn't hold back and shouted that she also wanted to paste it. Thus, Chen Shi brought her a small stool and let her step on it. He pasted a big "Fu" character on the window. Qin Yongyan didn't cultivate today. Early in the morning he came to the main hall. Then he placed an incense burner on the large red sandalwood carving table and lit 3 incense sticks. When the little fellow saw Qin Yongyan, she immediately ran to Qin Yongyan according to what Chen Shi had taught her. Then she excitedly shouted, "Grandpa! Grandpa! I wish you a happy new year and all the best. Good luck. Give me the red packet." After saying that, she looked at Qin Yongyan eagerly and didn't forget to reach out her little hand at the same time. Qin Yongyan was also stunned by her sudden trick. After being stunned for a while, he suddenly laughed and said, Okay. Grandpa will give you a red packet." Qin Yongyan patted the little fellow's little head. Then he took out a brand new 100 yuan note from his pocket and directly stuffed it into her hand. The little fellow held the brand new 100 yuan note and smiled happily. In fact, she didn't have any concept of money. Usually she only needed to call Papa if she wanted something. The reason why she was so happy now was because of the meaning attached to this 100 yuan note. This was the first time she received New Year's money. New Year's Eve was after the beginning of spring. At this time the temperature had obviously risen a lot. There were fewer cars during the spring festival, and there was no exhaust pollution. Shangjing City also changed the appearance of the past heavy smog, and for the first time blue sky and white clouds reappeared. After lunch, the couple took the little fellow to the door and pasted couplets. Family photo every year. Good luck and fortune every year. Horizontal writing, good luck and fortune. Just as the family of 3 was busy pasting couplets, a voice suddenly sounded from behind them. Ying? Qin Ruoying looked back and saw a middle-aged man and woman. The woman was about 40 years old, but she was very well maintained. She could be said to have a beautiful body and still had a charm. The man looked about the same age as Qin Yongyan. Looking carefully, he looked somewhat similar to Qin Yongyan. "Second uncle. Second aunt. You're back." Qin Ruoying handed the couplets in her hand to Chen Shi. Then she quickly walked in front of the 2 people and greeted them warmly. Second uncle Qin Yongwang and second aunt Wang Chuanju, who were her sister-in-law's parents. By the time Chen Shi brought out the last dish, the lively New Year's Eve dinner had finally begun. At the same time, the Spring Festival Gala began. Just like drinking wine without a side dish, if one didn't watch the Spring Festival Gala during the New Year's Eve dinner, one would feel that something was missing. Although the Spring Festival Gala in recent years had fallen into a vicious cycle of being held every year and scolded every year, if there was really a year when the Spring Festival Gala was suddenly not held, the people of the country would probably riot. Perhaps the Spring Festival Gala wasn't as bad as imagined. The reason why it was scolded every year was because everyone had high expectations for it. As the saying goes, love is hate. The more they scolded, the more it meant that they cared about it. It was lively on the TV and so was the Sihiyuan. Among the people at the table, except for the little girl, no one could be considered a real ordinary person. However, they were like ordinary people today. The family sat together happily, simply eating and chatting while watching the Spring Festival Gala. The little girl was soon full, but she didn't run around. Instead, she sat obediently in Wang Chuanju's arms and watched TV. She couldn't understand skits, nor could she hear the actors' lines clearly. She didn't even know the subtitles above, but whenever she heard the audience applauding on the television, the little girl would clap her little hands happily. The programs came one after another, and in a flash it was 12 o'clock. Before the host counted down, some impatient people had already gone to the streets and set off fireworks and firecrackers one after another. 10, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. As soon as the voice fell, the bell rang, and then the people of the country boiled over. The crackling of firecrackers suddenly exploded, and countless fireworks bloomed in the night sky, instantly illuminating half of the night sky. The family came to the courtyard one after another, looking up at the brilliant fireworks one after another. Not to mention how excited the little girl was. Even Qin Shueqing, who had always been cold, couldn't help but smile at this moment. After she finished her breakfast, she brought the little fellow to the main hall. The first day of the new year was the day to pay New Year's greetings to the elders, so Qin Yongyan and Qin Yongwang were already sitting in the main hall, waiting for the little fellow's arrival. She led the little fellow to Qin Yongyan, and then the little fellow bowed to him and said, "Grandpa, Happy New Year. I'm here to pay you New Year's greetings." "Oh, good child. Come, yesterday's doesn't count. Today's is the New Year's money from Grandpa." As he spoke, Qin Yongyan smiled and handed a big red packet to the little fellow. The little fellow touched the thick red packet, and suddenly grinned foolishly. Seeing this, she patted her head gently. Then, the little fellow seemed to come back to her senses, and hurriedly said to Qin Yongyan with a big smile, "Thank you, Grandpa. Happy New Year, Grandpa." The child was still young, so she didn't understand these traditional customs and ceremonies. Naturally, it was up to her parents to guide her. After she paid her New Year greetings to Qin Yongyan, she led her to Qin Yongwang again. Huaxia was particular about seniority. Qin Ruoying was the female, and Qin Yongyan was the maternal grandfather. Qin Yongwang was Qin Ruoying's second uncle, so the little fellow should call him granduncle. Wang Chuanju was granduncle's wife, so she should call him grandaunt or great-aunt. Granduncle didn't sound as intimate as grandpa, so she let the little fellow omit the word uncle in front, and just call them Grandpa and Grandma. "Grandpa, Grandma, Happy New Year." Wang Chuanju liked the little fellow very much. When she saw the little fellow bow to her, she immediately pulled the little fellow into her arms. "Yin is so good. Come, Grandma will give you a big red packet." "Thank you, Grandma." The little fellow held a big red packet in one hand, and her little face was so happy that flowers bloomed. Legend had it that in ancient times, there was a kind of little demon called a ghost. It had a black body and white hands, and every year on New Year's Eve, it would come out to harm people. People were afraid that ghosts would come to harm their children, so that night, they would light up the lanterns and sit without sleep. It was called guarding ghosts. Because of the homonym of sway and ghost, everyone thought that after the child received the New Year's money, they could ward off evil spirits and exorcise them, and spend the year peacefully. What the elders gave to the juniors was called ghost money. What the juniors gave to the elders was called lucky money. Generally, after paying their New Year greetings to the elders, they could go out and visit relatives. There were only so many people in the family, and they didn't have any relatives, so Wang Chuanju suggested that they take the little fellow to the temple fair to have fun together. She took the skewer from the little fellow with a smile and ate it. The little fellow turned to ask Wang Chuanju if she wanted to try, but Wang Chuanju shook her head with a smile and then wiped her mouth with a tissue. Wang Chuanju did not speak, but her attention was always on Qin Shi. Qin Shi felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by her. On second thought, instead of being remembered by the Wu Lian like this, it was better to take this opportunity to make it clear to them. So Qin Shi looked at Wang Chuanju and said to her directly, "The reason why you want me to join the Wu Lian is that you want to use me to deter other forces, right?" "Well, you can think of it that way." Wang Chuanju nodded. When she was about to say something, Qin Shi did not give her a chance to speak at all. Instead, he continued, "Then you can announce to the public that I have joined the Wu Lian. Anyway, I can't jump out and expose you, right?" "How can that be?" You are a celestial being. If you are willing to join the Wu Lian, you should be treated accordingly. I don't need any special treatment, so I won't join the Wu Lian. Hearing Qin Shi's resolute answer, Wang Chuanju could not help showing a trace of disappointment in her eyes, although she had been prepared for it. What a pity. However, just as Wang Chuanju was feeling disappointed, Qin Shi said with a smile, "How about this, if the Wu Lian has any problems that can't be solved, I can be a guest, but only once. What do you think?" Hearing this, Wang Chuanju's eyes lit up. She smiled and said, "Promise? It's a deal." In fact, this was not a simple conversation between an aunt and a niece, but a direct conversation between a Wu Lian and a celestial being. The meaning of this promise was not simple. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.